Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптя посорбати довбані щі, та трохи у щах перегрівся навар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Зі сходу припхались до нас барани, для восстановлення великої страни, найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Їх доводи, всяке озброєння, різне, ракети, потужні машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, і ми зачаїли на орків образу, з бандитів російських робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, на вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто ж винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає їх цар.
Hello, everyone. I am the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
Good evening, everybody. It's good to be with you on day 94 of the news.
And tonight we have absolutely incredible news as the Ukrainians have now gone back onto the attack, and we can see that the Russians are on the back foot. This is something that I knew was coming for quite some while at this point. Actually, have been talking with some people, and I kind of knew about this weeks in advance. And a lot of people have been concerned what was occurring in Severodonetsk area, and saying, what is going on there? We haven't seen anything happen on the side of the Ukrainians. Are they losing? The answer is no. The Ukrainians have taken the advantage here, considering that the Russians have used up all of their efforts to attack the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area, and they are now counterattacking near the Kherson area, where we've seen massive breakthroughs near the Kryvyi, I guess you could say, finger on the front line, and the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back to a degree that could only be considered a massive breakthrough, showing that the Ukrainians are not out of the fight. They are, in fact, not losing, and they are pushing the Russians in places where they can't really react. We've actually heard that there has practically been a collapse of the front lines here north of Kherson, and there is a small defense on the Russian side being made in between Biloirka and also Andriivka. We'll once again revisit that news later on tonight as we return to the Southern Front news. And so, before we move into the incredible news for tonight, let's get into the schedule for tonight's news. Once again, I think this is honestly amazing because one thing I was also getting concerned, honestly, about what was occurring at Severodonetsk near Lyman and also Popasna, and I was kind of worried that the Russians may actually make some progress and the Ukrainians may be on the back foot. But we can now see that they're going to most likely be tying up Russian resources that were being used in the Severodonetsk area elsewhere as they try and stop the hemorrhaging of Russian land in places that they really don't have the ability to. So it's great to see. I'm more than hyped to talk about this news, and we're actually going to be covering that as some of our first news tonight. But let's get to the schedule. Starting off, we'll actually be going straight to Kherson tonight once we get to the actual news, and we'll be covering the counterattack that has been going on there for the past 24 hours. Once again, I'm blown away. Hopefully y'all stick around and hear that. It's going to be the first thing on stream, so it will not be long. Once we cover this Kherson news, we're going to then move up to the location unknowns, and we're going to cover the location unknowns as well. Once we cover the location unknowns, we're going to start moving towards the Kharkiv area, but before we do, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat. After that, we're then going to cover the Kharkiv news and also this northern Donbass news. We're calling that the Severodonetsk news now, and see what's going on up there. It seems like the front has silenced a little bit today as we've gotten less news, and there's not as much of an indication as heavy fighting that was occurring yesterday happening today. So very interesting to note. We'll then answer 3 more questions before we move on to the southern Donbass, and then we will cover the rest of the southern front news. We'll skip over Kherson since we would have already covered it at that point, and go to the news in Odessa. And finally, we'll be wrapping up tonight's stream with a speech from President Zelensky as usual. And so, without further ado, the news we have all been waiting for, the Ukrainian counterattack. Most people most likely were thinking that the Ukrainian counterattack would happen directly against Russian forces in the Lyman and Popasna area. While I did have information that a counterattack was going to be conducted here within a short while, it made sense that it would not be occurring within this area. The Russians are the strongest in this part of the front than anywhere else, and in military strategy, it is much more advantageous to hit the enemy in weak spots instead of where they're at their strongest, because you'll just be grinding up your own resources in the effort. And so the Ukrainians have looked across the entirety of the front line from top to bottom and seen that the Russians are committing no offensive activity anywhere except for Severodonetsk, and decided, out of all of these very weak areas, the weakest area for them to push was here north of Kherson in the Kryvyi pocket. Some of y'all who were on last night's stream may actually remember that this pocket yesterday actually reached all the way up to this village of Vysokopilia. And just to give you all an idea of how far the Ukrainians have pushed the Russians back today alone, it's been nearly 15 miles in that one specific location. We also know that the Russians have been pushed back from the village of actually, that's going to be a tough one for me to pronounce. Hang on, everyone. I'm going to try and get that one right. Bereznehuvate, maybe. We're not going to try that one again. We're going to call it Baris from now on. But the Ukrainians pushed the Russians back from Baris, which is a total of 12 miles at least from where the front line once was. And so this pushback has been immense. In fact, it's going so fast that it even exceeds my normal expectation for a major breakthrough. In my mind, a major breakthrough is covering around 10 miles a day. The Ukrainians have managed to almost cover 15 miles in a single day. So with that, let's actually get to the news of what we've been seeing today. Of course, to start off, the Ukrainians, of course, declared that there is a counterattack underway, as we can see here, reported by Pravda.com. The counterattack did start just around, well, not 6 hours ago. Actually, it started at the very dawn of this day, and the counterattack's been going on since. It was finally reported 6 hours ago by Pravda, and the counterattack has been met with great success, according to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, and we also have evidence to back that up. Starting off on the easternmost side of this finger on the front line, we can see that the Russians were caught by surprise so much that there was actually a Mista abandoned in perfect running order, no damage to it whatsoever. And let's take a look at this video. Oh my lord. One second, let's hop over to Twitter real quick and take a look at that. Alright, so let me mute that and then put that up on screen. And here we can see one of Russia's Mista SPGs, of course, a pride of the Russian artillery units, and we can see here, imperfect condition, abandoned on the road. And that gives you an idea of how fast this counterattack by the Ukrainians has been conducted, that a Russian tank crew literally bailed out of their SPG without even taking any damage, just because the offensive was pushing so fast. So that kind of gives you an idea of the speed that the Ukrainians are now operating at in this part of the front line. Moving on to the next bit of news, more towards the central part of this, I guess you could call it finger. I'm still trying to figure out what exactly to call this thing, but we can see that the Ukrainian artillery is firing even faster. And when I say even faster, a lot of people have been saying that the M777, operated by the Ukrainians, has been fired somewhat slowly. But here in this video, we can see that Ukrainian gunners are, of course, getting more proficient with the piece, and they are starting to use it at a much faster rate of fire than we've seen previously. Here's the video. Here we can see them adjusting the aim of the piece. We can now see them fire it, and they are now preparing to reload. We can now see them load again the propellant, which comes after the shell, and so this piece is nearly ready to fire already. It's now prepared to fire.
Yes!
And so if we take a look at how long it took them to fire from shot to shot, the first shot occurred 17 seconds in, the second shot occurred around the 48-second mark. And so let me make sure I get my... No, wait a minute, I don't have to do too much math there. It was about 20 seconds to fire the piece, which is standard in the United States Army. And so this artillery unit now has the same proficiency in rate of fire that a normal artillery unit in the U.S. Army would have with this exact same artillery piece. These soldiers are fast learners. Now, it takes a decent amount of training, actually, to get to that kind of speed for the most part. Actually, most American soldiers in the U.S. Army have to go into job training after basic to learn how to fire this piece at that kind of speed. Now we can see that the Ukrainians have mastered this kind of, I guess you could say, speed in reloading and firing the piece within a matter of 2 weeks, which I could say is the most accelerated and fastest version that we've seen of any kind of soldier learning how to fire this piece. Whatever training regimen they train these soldiers on, the U.S. Army needs to start training normal soldiers on, because that would certainly make job training for the artillerists a decent amount shorter. Well, then again, there's probably a lot more to the artillery than just preparing how to fire the piece and loading it. There's, of course, other things like calculations and such things like that, but still, these Ukrainians learned this at a crash course rate, and not only is it still deadly accurate in their hands, but now the rate of fire has caught up as well, which is very impressive. I'm now going to let the video continue. We can now see them opening up the breach, putting the shell into the breach. crew then shoves the shell into the barrel. We can now see the next soldier running up with the propellant.
0020.
It's now been shoved into the barrel. Now they close the breech. And it is now ready to fire again.
Yes.
Now the piece is entirely ready to fire, and they fire it again. And while you can tell that the crew is still a little shaky at operating this piece, they are doing an incredible job. Just to have 2 weeks to learn how to operate this piece from scratch is impressive, to say the least, and the Ukrainians have stepped up to the challenge and once again done nearly the impossible with the amount of training time it's taken for them to actually use this piece. We can now see them preparing to fire the piece again.
Право. 0030 решай.
0030.
We can now see the next soldier coming up with the propellant, and they are working at an incredible speed.
Заряжай. Отходи. Решай.
Бусоль 0030 есть.
Piece is now ready to fire again, and they put out another round downrange.
Yeah, вышел.
Потом шел. Раз, два, три.
Бусоль есть.
Прицел есть. Пострел.
Piece is now fired again. The rate of fire, once again, is incredible for a crew that's only had 2 weeks to train with this piece and then actually use it. I have nothing but admiration for the Ukrainian artillerists. They go above and beyond in the accuracy of their fire and also the proficiency in their skill of using these kinds of artillery pieces. And I hope that everyone here on the stream notes that the Ukrainian artillery has to be first rate, if not the standard for the rest of the world to go off of in this day and age. And so, once again, amazing to see this unit operating with such speed. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news that we've gotten from this area, where we can see that a rare BMP was destroyed. Apparently, this is a BMP-1 AM. It appears to have had its normal BMP turret replaced with what appears to be the autocannon and the turret layout from a BTR-82. I've never seen one of these before, and I actually didn't know that this vehicle existed, until today. And so it's insane to me, honestly, to think that the Russians have lost one of these. I don't know how many they have. I'm assuming that this is an incredibly rare vehicle. Of course, we could pull it up and see if they have a lot of them. The BMP-1 AM. Let's see here. Do they give us a number? Let's see. They talk about the BMP-1. There's a BMP-1 AM before it was destroyed. Of course, well, actually, that's just a standard one. That's not that specific one. But let's see. BMP-1 had 20,000 produced, but how many are of the BMP-1 AM? Yikes, here we go. An upgraded vehicle rolled out in 2018. So this is Russia's attempt at modernizing the BMP-1s to bring them up to a modern spec, and what they're doing is they're taking the parts of a BTR-82's turret and then just slapping it down on top of the old BMP-1, which is from the 60s. So that thing is nearly 60 years old at this point. We can see that we don't actually have a number, it appears, which is very sad, because I would love to know how rare this vehicle is. I'm assuming incredibly rare. Oh, man, I don't think they're going to give us a number. Sadly, they're not, I don't think. But still, great to see that the Ukrainians are destroying some of Russia's most modern attempts at trying to create modernized vehicles. Of course, the BMP-1 AM is just a BMP-1 that has a BTR-82 turret on it, so it's not really like it's anything groundbreaking or new. It's literally just combining old technology from 2 armored personnel carriers and just combining them into one. So isn't any kind of advantage? I wouldn't suppose so. I think it's just putting the turret onto a different hull, I guess you could say. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see that another M777 in another part of the front line was battering the Russians once more. The Ukrainians do not give the Russians a break, and they mean they're going to get every single ounce of, I guess you could say, performance out of the M777s they've been given. Ever since the M777s have arrived in Ukraine, we have never gone a day without seeing one of them being used. And so here's the video of this M777 in what appears to be maybe a rye or a wheat field firing at the Russians.
Пошел!
Включил на Aviation 62. Один молоток.
And we're actually going to cut this video down a little bit because it is 2 minutes long and it's just the same thing as last.
Отлично.
But I wanted to show y'all the amount of artillery fire that the Ukrainians are levying against the Russians, which tells us a couple of things.
Она под броней.
Молодец. Давай, давай, ебашим. 5 пучків хоть закидуєте.
Заряжай. Армата!
Ну,
So we're going to cut the video short right there because the rest of the video is just them firing an entire salvo of rounds. But the reason of me showing both of these videos of both of these M777s operating down in the Kherson area is to show you that, number one, the Ukrainians apparently have a massive amount of 155mm shells to use, because we've now seen 2 examples on video of M777s being used today and firing a full salvo of rounds each. So this is giving us an idea that 155mm rounds are not in any kind of shortage for the Ukrainians, and apparently the Western nations like the United States that are providing these rounds are also not running out either, or we wouldn't see the Ukrainians using them to this degree. This must tell us that there is a steady supply of 155mm shells that is making its way to Ukraine, and hopefully that is the case, but that's what we can generally assume from both of these videos, is that by the usage of M777s alone, the Ukrainians are confident in the supply lines that will keep these guns running. So with that, wonderful to see that the Ukrainians are really pushing their objectives down here in the Kherson area and have managed to create one of the largest breakthroughs of the war in the amount of ground they've covered in a single day. Moving on to the next bit of news, and it's our final bit of news from the exploits today that the Ukrainians have had, is that we've seen the 14th once again using the tried and true Stugna to take out 3 Russian tanks. Of course, the M777 is the shining light of the Ukrainian artillery these days, along with the Caesar SPG and the FH-70. The Caesar was provided by the French and the FH-70 provided by the Italians. But there is nothing like a good old Stugna attack to put us all in a good mood. Here we can see 3 Russian tanks in the distance. They have now fired the first Stugna, and it is traveling on the way to the tank. It's now hit. The crew celebrates. And then they decide it's time for a second celebration, because there's nothing wrong with that. They've now taken out the second tank, and now we can see them taking out the third tank. And the cheers are resounding, and the counterattack is in full swing. It appears, based off of the size of this breakthrough today, that Russian forces are incredibly weak in this area. To cover 16 miles over a single day in one breakthrough is unheard of. It was unbelievable when we heard that the Ukrainians had managed to break through east of Kharkiv and covered 10 miles for 2 days to reach the city of Stary Saltiv, and we've nearly seen them make a breakthrough of that same size in 1 day in the Kryvyi Rih area. This is letting us know for sure that while the Russians have pretty much thrown everything they have into the Severodonetsk area near Lyman and Popasna to be able to eke out these small breakthroughs, apparently the rest of the front lines are in dire straits, and the Ukrainians are biding their time, and they're starting to, I guess you could say, shrink them the best they can. This may also be the reason why Russia is pumping in T-62s that have been in storage for around 50 years, and also T-80BVs that are so old they still have the Soviet parade camouflage on them, because they're running out of equipment that's actually fieldable because of the amount of losses they've taken or the lack of supplies and parts they have to actually keep the modern tanks running. Of course, there's a load of problems with bringing old tanks into the battlefield as well. You know, they're old, so a lot of the parts on them aren't going to work, including the basic ones like spark plugs. So we're going to wait and see how those tanks perform. Hopefully, they literally break down and the Ukrainians can just capture them or destroy them where they've broken down. So, wonderful to see. And before we even move on to the location unknowns, this kind of stuff has to be celebrated, of course. These kinds of things, while not really unexpected by the world anymore of the Ukrainians, we've seen the Ukrainians pull off the impossible time after time again. A lot of people were getting worried about what was going on in the Severodonetsk area, and it does appear, even at the moment, that the Ukrainians are in a very pitched battle to hold the Russians back. But one thing that we can assume by the picture that's occurring in the Severodonetsk area and also the picture that's occurring here in the Kherson area is that there must be some massive discrepancies in the Russian army that's leading to them having a massive collapse down here in the southern front, where they've lost 16 miles of ground in nearly every direction over the course of one day. And then in the northern and more eastern part of the front line, they've managed to make 2 5-mile breakthroughs. You see what I'm getting at here? The thing is that they must be pumping everything they have left into this one small offensive near Severodonetsk to make these kinds of breakthroughs, because we don't see any other kind of action occurring across the rest of the front lines. And based off of the amount of land Ukraine has gained down here in the Kryvyi Rih area in the Kherson Oblast, one would have to assume the Russians didn't even put up a fight today, and the Ukrainians practically rolled through them, and now the Russians are attempting to create a very weak defensive line down here near Andriivka, Lozove, and Bielo-Irka. That's the only thing we can assume. And so I hope this reinforces the idea, and I think it's crucially important to state this, is that while the Russians may make progress up here, they may still make a lot of progress. We know that the Russians are putting everything they have into that up here near Severodonetsk. It appears that the rest of the front line is in dire straits for the Russians, and they're lacking supplies, equipment, and the actual morale to carry through on even a token defense. And so I believe that with the amount of progress the Ukrainians have made today, let's just get out a ruler and let's measure another 16 miles for tomorrow. If the Ukrainians manage to recover another 16 miles within the next day, they're going to be within striking distance. Let me try and measure that from there. They're going to be 10 miles away from Novokakhovka. They're pretty much going to have pushed the Russians out of the entirety of the western side of the Dnipro River in the south of the country, if this counterattack continues with the same speed it's had today. And so all I've got to say is I'm looking forward to that news. While the Severodonetsk area, of course, is a little questionable still, and the situation is looking kind of balanced at this moment, the situation here in the south is completely in Ukraine's favor, and it's showing massive failures in the Russian army. So without going over that again, I hope that everyone is cheering at home right now about the great news we've had. I know Operator Starsky is dancing right now because this is incredible news, and this is wonderful stuff. And so with that, we're now going to leave the Kherson area and the huge successes that the Ukrainians have had there. Once again, I hope everyone wishes the Ukrainians down there the best of luck, the best of health, and the best fighting spirit. So with that, we're now going to move up north to the most northerly news we have today, and we're now going to cover all of our location unknowns. We actually have a really high amount of them today, so it's going to be a little bit. So I hope y'all all enjoy these location unknowns, because we've had some very interesting ones today. Starting off, we've seen a Russian tank get destroyed by the Ukrainians once again. And this Ukrainian actually took a pretty good look. We actually do have a speech-to-text translation at the bottom, but I do believe it will be cut off by the screen. And so, if y'all can't see it, I'll make sure to mute the video. Well, actually, I'll just mute the video here because I know y'all can't see that. And I'll just read it off so that we all know what this Ukrainian is saying. This is how a Russian tank that was trying to break through our defenses looks like. As you can see, it looks pretty bad. You now see him standing on top of the tank and inspecting it. It is a T-72B, one of Russia's older versions of the T-72. Our sugar was stolen, is what the man says. It's Muscovite. Now he's showing us some Oral-B toothbrushes. Some socks. Now we can see him looking down into the actual turret. Now we can see him walking over it into the gunner's hatch. Now he's looking down in there. Rosneft P coat is what the man says. Just want to make sure I clarify. This will be with every occupier who comes to our land, is what the man says. So we can see right there that the Russian tankers are literally using, I guess you could say, the side compartments on the turret to store away small bits of Ukrainian loot, specifically right here at the very first part of this video. We could see a bag of sugar. Oh my god. Now, some people may know that I actually have a history with sugar and this war, and I cannot believe it. The Russians are so desperate for sugar, the tankers literally have left an entire storage compartment on the side of the tank for the sole bag of sugar. I don't know how much the sugar is going for in Russia these days, but apparently a Russian soldier can get some sugar with some sugar, if you know what I mean. And it looks like they won't be doing that today, as this tank was destroyed, and it does appear that the crew was either killed or abandoned the tank. Most likely abandoned the tank, considering we don't see any bodies or blood. And so, hopefully those Ukrainian tankers are captured, and they get taught the value of sugar and the reason why Russia should not go to war if they like their sugar. And so with that, that is the end of that little bit of news. I thought it was incredibly hilarious. Out of all the things that these soldiers could have stolen and fit in that compartment, they stole a bag of sugar. It is literally a meme at this point, how much the Russians are desperate for sugar. They're killing each other. Well, they're not really killing each other. They're fighting each other in the grocery stores for sugar. We now see Russian soldiers going out of their way to steal sugar out of Ukrainian homes. That's hilarious to me, that they're so desperate for sugar. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see Russian troops firing on Ukrainians that are supposedly advancing towards their positions. Here's the video. Unfortunately, it is muted for some reason. I do have the audio on, but here we can see a Russian soldier firing a PKP into the distant tree line here in these plains, and we can see that they're apparently in some kind of trench works, or they've built a HESCO wall. Although, no, it's definitely a trench that they're in, but it kind of looks like a HESCO wall a little. We can now see a Russian soldier using some kind of ATGM. Sorry, not an ATGM, an anti-tank weapon. That's a proper name for it. He's now fired it at the supposed Ukrainian forces in the distance. What in worth was that? Hang on. Is that a... I can't tell if that's an SV-98 or a modded out Mosin, unfortunately. It's not an SVD because it's got a bolt. We can now see the Russian soldiers looking out into the distance, and once again wondering, what are they really firing at? We didn't see a single vehicle in the distance, and they never showed us the soldiers they're supposedly firing at, although they are definitely in a position where the cameraman could literally just set the camera right up on the trench, kind of crouch down, and look at the screen on the side of the camera, and just zoom in to where the Ukrainians are, but they never show them. And that leads me to think, I wonder if this is a propaganda video made somewhere in the DPR and LPR where they built some mock-up trenches, and they're trying to pretend like they're firing at the Ukrainians. Of course, I don't want to always discredit Russian videos because sometimes they do show actual verifiable proof that they're firing at the Ukrainians, but every time they don't, it's always very sketch. And also on top of that, we've seen so much Russian propaganda at this point, everyone almost has a bias, including me, to believe that most of the stuff is faked. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see an incredibly long video of a British volunteer who's actually the son of a member of parliament in Britain. For those of you who are international viewers or viewers from the United States that don't necessarily know what an MP or a member of parliament is, the member of parliament is like your local, well, not really your local representative, more like your national representative, kind of like a senator, or not a senator. That'd be more of like the House of Lords, I guess, in British terms. It's more like a representative, you know, in the House of Representatives for your district and your state. That's a lot like what a member of parliament is in Britain. They are in the lower house. We're not going to go through that, actually. That's a whole entire discussion on British government. They have some really cool traditions, I'll say that, but we're not going to go into that. We'll save that for a video on this channel down the road in the future. So here we can see a video of the son of the MP who is fighting in Ukraine. I hope the MP in Britain is incredibly proud of their son. The MP in question is actually a part of the Conservative and Unionist Party in the United Kingdom. Regardless of their political affiliation, I hope that they are incredibly proud of their son and that they are fighting for the right thing in Ukraine. And so, here's the video of this soldier going about his business on the front lines.
Right. You good? Brit team, where are you? Who's that? Who? Let me see him. Come on, bro. Come on. Come on, Dino. Come on, brother. Come on, mate. Come on, you got this. Strong guy, we gotta move now or we're gonna die. Move. Right. Okay, over this. Over this. Come on, my brother. Come on. I've got you. Come on, Dino. Move! 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 Good man. Come on. Come on. You're okay. You're okay. Come on. Come on. Up here. Last bit. Keep going.
Now I'm going to pause this video for a moment and explain what's happened, because there wasn't really a lot of lead up to this in the video. This soldier here, unfortunately I don't have his name. I hate to say that. I wish I could give this British volunteer credit for who he is and what he's doing. But what's happening in the video is that one of his comrades in his Foreign Legion unit has been hit and wounded. That's why you can hear the grunting in the background. And he's trying to carry his friend out, and also buds from his unit are coming over and trying to help him out with getting this man out of here. So it's a little bit of a tense situation, but we can actually hear that although he does sound panicked, he is being incredibly brave and doing his best to make sure that his friend will get out of there one way or the other. And so I'm going to let the video continue.
Come on! Come on, Dino! Come on! Move here! Move! Go, go, go! Oh, I'm going to lose it. Right, I can't move it. I can't move. No. Oh, come here. Come on, Dino. Come on. We're gonna, come on. Dino, we're gonna go stop. Come on. Move. Move. Right. Here. Line down. Line down. Here. Lie down. Lie down. Okay.
I'm going to pause this video again real quick. It appeared that Dino, who is the man they were helping out here, has had some serious injury to his leg. It is appearing to cause him great pain to even try and put any pressure on it, and so it was a struggle to get him to this point behind this tree. We can now see the medic, I'm assuming, tending to the wound on his leg, and hopefully Dino will be coming out of this all right. Of course, we have a long amount of video to go, but I have to give credit where credit's due to the British volunteers who've gone over there. Of course, as an American, I always talk about the American volunteers who've entered over there in Ukraine. Of course, the Americans have a very long and prestigious military history that backs up the history of our nation, but that can also be said for many of the volunteers that have gone over there. The British have one of the, I guess you could say, largest and longest military histories in the world, along with the French, and have won, I believe, more battles than any other country rather than France. And so that gives you a perspective of the kind of military history, legacy, and heritage that the British have, and it appears that this man, along with Dino, who's the wounded man here in this video, have gone over to Ukraine, and they are fighting much like they have during the entirety of British military history. And of course, one always has to give credit to the foreign volunteers, because no one actually required them to go. They've gone voluntarily. And so Dino here is actually taking a bullet to the leg in the defense of a country that he doesn't even have to fight for. And I believe that is something incredibly admirable, and I believe that the soldier should be given the utmost respect. And so we're going to let the video continue.
Okay. All right, Dino. You okay, bro?
Там есть турникет? Есть.
Okay, let's go. Yeah, okay. All right.
They've, of course, censored the wound, but we can see that a bullet has gone through the lower part of his thigh. It looks like it would be incredibly painful. Of course, I've never been shot in the thigh to know, but one would obviously assume that that's got to be painful.
Tourniquet tight enough. Is it tight? Hold on, come here. Come here.
Перчатки.
Yeah.
No,
Okay,
no.
just checking. Dino, you okay, brother? Good man, you move fast and well there, brother. All right? You okay? Listen, you're all good, man. Yeah? Well done. Well done. Okay. We need... Where's Ozzy? Okay. What's our location? What's our situation on Kharkiv or anything else like that? Okay.
Время уже не турникета. Мастер. Время, скажите. Time.
Time is 12:24. 12:24. Okay. TQ went on at 12:20. 12:20 TQ.
Yes, okay.
Okay, cool. Get your head down and move now. What?
Better.
We gotta go. Come on.
We can now see that they're having a move
I
on.
can't leave you. Grab his helmet. Someone help.
Go.
We need to put him somewhere. Come here.
Actually, I have to. I know that a lot of people don't want me to stop the video here, but I can actually see that he has a patch on for what appears to be one of the household guard units. So this. Let me make sure I'm correct in saying that, and I'm sorry to pause the video, but the household guards emblem. Well, no, we'll type in patch. Yes, this is a man from the household guards. These are actually the units that are assigned to protect the, I guess you could say, the monarch of the United Kingdom. Of course, they are the ones that wear the red tunics. Of course, protect the Windsor Castle, Buckingham Palace, and also all the other royal residences. And so this man can be considered one of the cream of the crop of the Russian the British armed forces. And so we are seeing one of Britain's elite here and how they handle a bullet wound. And while you can tell he's in pain, he is handling it like a champ. And so we're going to let the video continue.
Go, helmet. Go. Go, try walk, or we're gonna die, man.
Не надо, нормально. Да.
Come on.
Come on, my friend, come on.
No problem. Okay.
No problem.
Yeah.
More.
We need to move him. We need to put him down for a minute. We need to put him down. I can't. I've just got him out of there.
We can now see that another soldier has taken over the job of carrying Dino out.
Oh, you are. I'm blowing out. Right.
And I see a lot of people in the chat saying he's a grenadier guard. And after this video is over, we'll go into a little bit of history about
Martin,
them.
where are you? Okay, all 7-6, yeah? It. The anti-tank weapon. Oh. Go! He's there.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Go, keep moving. Okay.
Moving.
Yeah, keep moving. Jack you.
Come with us. Let's try and hit this tank.
Well, let's go. We gotta hit the tank, yeah? Have you got an anti-tank weapon? You're just gonna...
Ed has.
Ed, let's go get this tank. Right, where's the road? Hold on. Let me just reload. Okay. Right. How you doing, brother? Yeah? Yeah, bro. Let's do this. Yeah, tourniquet. Couldn't put one finger under it. It was fine. Okay? He'll be all right. He'll keep his leg. Yeah, that was a good effort. Nice and tight. Go on. Let's go. Where's the road, bro?
We can now see the unit pushing onwards towards the road to get their boy out of there.
Where's the road? We're going to get the tank.
And the video ends there. And it was one hell of a video for sure. Wait a minute, hang on. Let me check and make sure. Yep, that is the end of the video. Just double checking because it did show it was only halfway through. But we could see there that one of the soldier's buds named Dino was shot in the leg. Apparently, it wasn't a shot directly to the bone. It appears to have been grazing directly alongside it. Of course, it appeared to be incredibly painful, but they did manage, along with the entire unit, to get Dino out of there and hopefully to some medical aid. One thing we did notice that was very interesting about Dino is that he had a patch on him that had a blue, maroon, and a blue stripe on it. And we also saw what appeared to be a kind of grenade. And a lot of y'all who may be international viewers and also American viewers may be wondering, why am I harping on that so much? What does that really mean? The reason why I'm harping on it is because that is, of course, one of the emblems of the Household Guards. And in particular, I had a bunch of people in the comments say it was from the Grenadier Guards. The Grenadier Guards, if I am correct, is one of the oldest Household Guards. Let's see. I believe it actually is the oldest, one of the oldest household guards in the United Kingdom. Let me make sure. I'm not exactly sure about that, but I do know that it's one of the oldest for sure, founded in 1656. The household guards, of course, travel around the world and actually serve in combat. They not only guard the Queen, but they are actually tried and true combat soldiers, one of Britain's best units. So we can see that this man actually has an elite military history behind him, and he's also gone over to fight in Ukraine. And to say that such a prestigious soldier, honestly, from such a well-known military unit in the United Kingdom is over there fighting for Ukraine is really something. And I believe that Dino deserves a whole load of credit for handling that like a champ and going over there when no one asked him to. What a hero, and what a guy, really. And so, of course, very impressive to see, and I do wish that unit the best of luck. The British, of course, I'm a little biased, but I really like the British military, and of course we can see that they are carrying and handling themselves incredibly well while they're volunteering and fighting inside of Ukraine. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, and we're now going to see an Ukrainian Mi-17 firing at the Russians. We've seen that Ukrainian helicopter and aerial action in general has been increasing over the past few weeks, as it appears that Russia's air defenses are no longer posing as much a threat to the Ukrainian air forces as they once did. The Mi-17 is now flying right over the cameraman and tilting upwards and firing off its salvo of rockets at the Russians. We can now see the Mi-17 hitting the floor and popping some flares, and we can see that hopefully those rockets will be on their way to some very unsuspecting Russian units and catch them off guard, maybe trying to get a pack of sugar. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see inside of a Ukrainian BTR-80. This is actually a very rare bit of footage, because while we've seen inside some APCs before from the Ukrainian side, we've never seen what the inside of a BTR-80 looks like from the Ukrainian side. And so let's take a look at this video.
Іди ж ти сюди.
When you see the gunner firing the gun on the BTR-80. And with that, that's the end of the video. One thing that I would like to note, this is more important showing the inside of this BTR-80 compared to a Russian BTR-80, because surprise, surprise, the Russians and the Ukrainians actually use BTR-80s. Both of them do, to a decent degree. And we've actually seen inside of Russian BTR-80s on multiple occasions. And one thing I have to know is that while we can see some minor rusting, it appears, here and there inside of this tank, this BTR-80 is kept to a higher standard of cleanliness by far than a Russian tank. If we were to look inside of a Russian BTR-80, there would be trash all over this part on the bottom right side of this film. There would be trash up near the driver's seat. There would also, everything would be rusting inside of the tank. Paint would be chipping and flaking off. This seat definitely would have all kinds of fabric just strewn about. It looked like a dog ripped into it and started chewing it up. Actually, I don't think that's fabric. I think that that is the back of the seat there. But still, this thing would be in dire straits, and it appears that although the Ukrainians have had a smaller military budget and have a smaller amount of vehicles, they've been keeping these vehicles, at least in this video, up to a much higher standard of cleanliness than the Russians, which does show the professionalism of their forces, as they take care of even the tedious things, like making sure that the inside of the vehicle is clean. And while being a small factor, it's still very important in showing the professionalism of a soldier. And that's why a lot of people don't understand, and of course, you know, I'm speaking from an outsider's perspective, But why does the army the U.S. Army make sure that soldiers make a bed the right way, make sure that vehicles are always cleaned out, even to the point that it's sometimes ludicrous, make sure the vehicles are washed, make sure that they're driven around, and that's all to make sure that those vehicles are in tip-top condition. And we can see that the Ukrainians, most likely because they're adopting NATO, well, not really NATO, but Western standards and doctrines, they're also trying to keep up with that level of professionalism as well. So incredibly interesting observation to see, and I hope that we see this through multiple Ukrainian vehicles that we are able to see the inside of as the war goes on. We're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a Stugna hitting an armored personnel carrier loaded with troops. I guess you could say that the Russians managed to get a load of flight miles today, because this Stugna definitely sent some people flying. Here we can see the Stugna lining up onto this BTR, and we can now see that the missile is on the way. You can see a load of Russian troops riding on top of the MTLB, which tells us that either there are people inside, or they've decided that it's unsafe to be inside the vehicle, so they're riding on top of it. One or the other. It didn't really turn out well for them, as you can see here. Oof. We can now see that the armored personnel carrier was nearly coming to a dead stop right after the hit, and it most likely means that most of the crew on top of the MTLB and inside of it were killed nearly instantly. So with that, we've seen that the Ukrainians have managed to wipe out a pretty sizable amount of Russians. I'm assuming anywhere in between the squad and platoon level. Although it's really hard to assume how many soldiers were inside the armored personnel carrier in question, but it was a sizable amount of troops that were wiped out with that Stugna alone, and also another Russian armored personnel carrier. We're now going to be moving on to our next bit of Location Unknown news, where you once again see Ukrainian D-20s in action near the front. This is actually the former commander of the Azov regiment in this video, so let's take a look. Looks like he's having a fun time up there, and it also looks like the crew that's operating that piece may also be having a fun time. Once again, not to try and make war sound fun or anything, but I've never actually seen the Ukrainians, at least in the videos they send out, not having a fun time. They're always dancing, generally having incredibly high spirits, and so I would say their morale is impressive. Even under fire and stressful situations, like we saw that that British volunteer helping out Dino, while they do sound panicked, they still keep their cool and their professionalism intact. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some more pictures of the Caesar SPG in use. Now, the Caesar SPG has been shown a couple of times on this news already, but I always love to take a moment to show off Western artillery pieces and let everyone know that there is, in fact, a large amount, even smorgasbord at this point, of Western artillery pieces that are operating in Ukraine, and here we can once again see the Caesar SPG being used in this field. Of course, the Caesar SPG is incredibly good. It does have the 155mm gun. It's not the M777, but it does use the same caliber of round. And the setup and stowaway time for this gun, considering that it is mounted on the back of a truck, is insanely fast. It can be set up in 20 seconds and stowed within 20 seconds, meaning that its scoot and shoot abilities are some of the fastest out there. Also, the reload rate is pretty decent as well, and so altogether, an incredibly competent SPG, and the Ukrainians are certainly going to be putting it to work, as we can see here in this video. They already are. So hopefully the rounds are landing accurately. Of course, we don't really have to say hopefully. The Ukrainian artillery is some of the most accurate in the world, and I don't doubt for a minute that most of these rounds that these Ukrainians have fired have fallen down range and hit dead on the mark. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a missile fell very close. And when I mean close, I mean right in front of this guy. I can't even attest to whether the man filming lived or not, because the explosion was nearly just right on the road, about 20 yards in front of him. And so here's the video. That was incredibly close. Hopefully the cameraman is alright. It does seem like he may have been thrown back by the explosion, but hopefully he didn't suffer any kind of shrapnel wounds or wounds from flying debris. Of course, being in a war zone is incredibly dangerous, and you can see, as an example here, how shocking and how loud one of these explosions can be. And of course, we don't know how damaging it was to the cameraman in question. Hopefully he's okay. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see the world's strongest man in Ukraine. And you wouldn't believe it, but the world's strongest man, and he's not only Ukrainian, but he also hunts orcs in his free time. And so let's take a look at this video. Today he actually set a record of lifting 542 pounds in an overhead press. Now this is a feat. And so you are not only looking at the world's strongest man, you're looking at one of Ukraine's soldiers, because apparently in his free time he also serves in the Ukrainian military. So I think any Russian running into this guy is going to have a tough day, because he's literally just going to pick them up and fold them like paper. So best of luck to the Russians that run into this man, because he doesn't even need a rifle or body armor for that matter. The bullets are going to bounce right off of the raw muscle he's got. And so with that, we're now moving on to the next bit of news, where we can see a Ukrainian MiG-29 with full afterburner at low altitude. This video was taken just today, which does let us know, once again, that the Ukrainian Air Force is still kicking and living, and that they do have a sizable amount of fighter aircraft, as the spottings of them have been getting more and more frequent as the war has continued, letting us know that the Russians are flat-out liars and they never destroyed most of the Ukrainian Air Force. So here's the video. And look at that. Now that's a sight. Godspeed to the pilot. I hope he scores a kill at least. And now we can see him doing an unrestricted climb, probably to 30,000 feet. Who knows? That's actually the cruising altitude of a commercial airliner, is around 36,000 feet. And so I don't know if he'd be climbing up to there. I feel like he would be exposed to a lot of sand batteries. But still, best of luck to that pilot, and it's wonderful and great video to see that the Ukrainian Air Force is still up there and still flying. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see some Stinger training. And while the house may look old, or the building they're in may look old, they are using some high-tech training equipment. They have actually gotten some VR headset goggles, and they're training soldiers how to use Stingers with it. So let's check this out, and let's see what this looks like. And we see here, it appears that he has a mock Stinger in his hands, and he is learning how to fire it. And we can now see what appears to be the instructor over here looking at his perspective of what he's doing. We can now see that he's launched the missile in the simulation, and it is now tracking its target and hit. So really cool to see that the Ukrainians are actually trying to use new and innovative methods on training their soldiers. Of course, I think the United States may already have had something like this, but it's great to see that the Ukrainians are also starting to, I guess you could say, think out of the box and actually start using some of this modern computer simulations to train soldiers how to use these weapons properly in the field. Of course, I don't think they did that with the M777. I think that was kind of learning on the fly, but it's great to know that Ukrainian soldiers will be getting a better feel for the weapons they're using before they actually use them. Great to see, and I hope that this kind of stuff does continue with many different kinds of weapon systems as the war goes on. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see a fighting woman in Ukraine. There are a decent amount of women that have been fighting in the armed forces of Ukraine, and here we can see Lyubov Plaksiuk. Hopefully I pronounced that name correctly, sorry if I didn't, but she's actually the first woman in Ukraine to head an artillery division in the army. She actually used to be a history teacher and a phone operator, and as the war began, she became the commander of a self-propelled artillery battalion. Of course, I love the caption there. It helped me a lot in describing this, though we can see here the woman in question, Plaksiuk, and we can also see another picture here of her in full protective gear and also appearing to aim one of the artillery pieces. Hopefully her artillery unit scores a load of hits, and it's great to see that everyone in Ukraine, including history teachers, are doing their part in making history happen. So wonderful to see, and I hope she gets a page in the books. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can see something that you can already see on screen, but I've got to lead into this because this one's really, really neat. A lot of people have been saying the Americans need to send better artillery. The Americans need to send better artillery. The Ukrainians are in trouble. They need to send more artillery. And so the United States has been stepping up to that challenge. They've sent over M777s. They're now saying they're going to send over the M142 MLRS, which is one of the best in the world. And now, today, the Ukrainians showed a picture. They have Paladins, and they're using them. Now that's pretty neat. I don't know about y'all, but I'm pretty excited about that stuff right there. The Paladin uses a 155mm gun, just like the M777, but it is mounted in an SPG chassis along with a turret. Hopefully, the Ukrainians can use this Paladin to an incredibly good degree, and I hope that all of y'all are as excited about this news as me, because I think it's incredible that the Ukrainians have gotten one of America's most famous SPGs, the M109 Paladin. And so with that, we're now going to move on to our last bit of news, where we can see today that the Ukrainians have declared that 30,000 Russian soldiers have been killed as of today. Today, the Ukrainians surpassed the number of 30,000 Russian soldiers killed. Unfortunately, we still do not have an accurate and up-to-date casualty statistic for the Ukrainians, but we can see here that they have made an infographic today showing that 30,000 Russian soldiers have been killed. We have no clue how many have been wounded, but usually the number of wounded is twice, if not triple, the amount of killed soldiers that an army will endure. We can actually see that the Ministry of Defense has released a statement with this, and I'll read that for us real quickly. 30,000. Does this huge number make us happy? No. This should not have happened. But as long as even one enemy soldier remains on our land, we will continue to be unhappy, regardless of how many zeros are added to this horrible statistic. And so while, of course, the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense is taking a route of civility here and saying that they don't really want to brag about this number, they are making it clear they are totally fine with making this 300,000. So with that, hopefully the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense can continue to report incredible numbers like these, showing that the defense of Ukraine is going incredibly well, and the Russians do not gain an inch of ground or lose an inch of ground without taking unbelievable losses in the process. And so, with that, that is the conclusion to the Day 94 Location Unknowns. This is not the end of the news, of course. This is just the end of the first segment. And so we're now going to start moving into the Kharkiv area. But before we do, we're going to answer 3 questions from the chat. And I've seen some incredible questions come through that we can answer. And so stick around for these because I thought they were fairly good. And I think that the answers will also be great as well. And so with that, on to the questions.
All right. So good evening again, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. As the Enforcer said, we do have quite a few good questions tonight. And as always, as we constantly say, if you don't want to put in a super chat, feel free to put your question in the live chat and tag either one of us, and we will put it in the spreadsheet and try to answer it before the stream ends. So first up from the super chats, we have a $30 donation from Mom Cat Max, who says, "For your pizza and beer fund, Slava Ukraine."
Well, I thank you so much for the support and supporting our pizza and beer fund. Unfortunately, I do not drink, but I do love a pizza. We actually got some Papa John's tonight, and I have to say that I'm starting to warm up to the barbecue chicken pizza. I wasn't a big fan of it initially, but I've gotten one now, and I gotta say, fairly good. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. That's the only way we can keep this channel running is through viewer support, and we appreciate every single person who helps us out and continues to help this channel keep running. Without y'all, we couldn't do it. And so I thank you all so much once again for the support. It helps us out a great deal, and we will make sure to get a pizza with that. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have the return of a channel legend. George, New York's premier contractor, puts in a $20 donation and says, "Slava Ukraine. Let's talk about Ukraine reserves and current capabilities. Enforcer, thanks for being loyal and been doing this for 94 days.
Well, I thank you so much for the support. You have been here forever, Premier Contractor. I mean, like, I remember you from, like, the first days. And so you've been around, I would assume, for 90 days at this point. 3 solid months watching this news daily and, of course, listening to my updates. And I have to say, I'm so happy that a load of people on here, I mean, like, right now, we have 7,400 people watching. Of course, a couple hundred left when the question segment started. For some reason, it always happens. Don't know why, but some people just cannot stand the question segments. But anyways, it's wonderful to know that so many people come here and listen to the news every single night and find it to be a credible and reliable source in terms of how many times we upload this, which is, of course, nightly, and also how much people do appreciate it, and I'm highly honored that people do enjoy the news I deliver and find something worth it. Well, something out of it that is worth it. And so I thank you so much once again for supporting us. It does help us out a great deal, and it will help us to continue on another 90 days if we have to. And so with that, I thank you once again so much for the support from the bottom of my heart. I actually made a little comment after stream, after Matthew got off and the end stream card had popped up, and I was like, thank you all so much once again, because I think about it a pretty good deal of how fortunate I am that I have such a great community that enjoys what I do. Because, you know, I could be running a terrible stream, but apparently a lot of people love it, and I am more than honored that a lot of people find it worth their time. And so I thank you so much once again. It means more to me than anyone will ever know. And so with that, we're moving on to the final question of this segment, and then we'll be returning to the Kharkiv and northern Donbass news.
And the final one of the segment goes to H2O Barry Matt, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much for your continued support. He says, did you hear about the countdown online to blow the Crimean bridge to mainland Russia? Is there any validity in your opinion? Slav Ukraine and Leaf Spring Army, baby.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And Leaf Spring Army, if you're a member of the Leaf Spring Army, throw that down in the live chat right now, and let's see how many new members of the Leaf Spring Army we can get tonight on stream. Also, not to do a merciless plug for the like button here, because I don't really like doing merciless plugs mid-stream, but make sure to hit that like button. So many people don't know how much that actually helps out a YouTube channel if you slam the like button, but if you do, it shows that a high volume of the viewers enjoy what they're watching, and they want this to reach more people. And so the more likes we get, the more this news reaches other people, and then they can see it. And so if you find the news worthwhile, help another person out in finding this good news, and hit that like button. And so with that, could you reread that question one more time, Matthew, since I just went through a merciless plug so I can make sure to answer it pretty well?
So H2O said, did you hear about the countdown online to blow the Crimean bridge to mainland Russia? Is there any validity in your opinion? And Slav Ukraine.
All right, so to answer the question, I do not think there's any validity to that. First off, the Ukrainians are not going to put out a timer of when they're going to destroy that bridge. First off, the Ukrainians don't actually have the ability as of the moment to actually destroy the bridge. And so that number, this countdown, is definitely not coming from any kind of Ukrainian government source. Also, it's very arbitrary to me to put a countdown on something, because it may never happen. You know, even if Ukraine does get the ability, they may never pursue that. They may find it more important for the Russians to believe that there's a supply line down there than to actually destroy it. So, unfortunately, I don't think there's any validity to that, because the Ukrainians aren't going to telegraph their plans like that in advance. You know, this isn't like the evil guy in a movie where he explains his entire plan to the hero and then the hero can save himself or something. In real war, no one wants to televise their plans in advance, because that puts them at a disadvantage off the bat. So sadly, I'm going to have to say there's probably no credibility to that countdown timer, but still, I do hope that there is a countdown timer ticking down somewhere in the Ministry of Defense saying that they will destroy that bridge at some point or sometime. I don't know how well defended it is. It is near the port city of Kerch, and also it is in the Kerch Strait, which is vitally important to the Russians and their objectives. And so I think that the air defenses around this area would be very strong. But I could be wrong, and the Ukrainians could probably strike this thing within the next few hours. I don't know. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And with that, we have now reached the end of the question segment. We're now going to continue on with the Kharkiv news and also the Severodonetsk news, which we have a pretty decent amount of today, and also it's showing some interesting trends. Starting off in the Kharkiv region today, we've actually seen the Ukrainian soldiers advancing through the area. It does show that while the Ukrainians have slowed their offensives, they apparently are still continuing to a small degree, as we can see these Ukrainian soldiers pushing forward and also passing by a destroyed 2S3, I believe. And now, a lot of people are going to observe that these soldiers aren't far spread out, and I'd have to agree. I'm not really sure why, but this may be because if they were to spread these guys out far enough, the line would be so long that you couldn't really see the front of it or the next part of it visually all too well, and they may be scared that this number of soldiers on foot would easily get lost and the cohesion would fall apart if they're too spread out. So I'm not really sure why they're doing this, but it appears to be a deliberate choice. We can now see them passing by the destroyed ruins of the SPG, and we can also see that it was apparently here for a pretty good while, and I'll show y'all why there's evidence for that. Right here. All of these shells are spent. These things didn't explode inside the tank. They were fired from the SPG and then thrown out of the turret. And so this lets us know that this SPG sat in this spot for probably hours on end, because look at all the shells this thing threw out of itself. An untold amount, about 100 or more. And so this lets us know that this SPG was doing no shooting and scooting, and like the Russians, as incompetent as they are, they literally just sat there and kept on firing that SPG from the same spot without ever moving it or thinking about it. And so, once again, evidence of Ukrainian pushes in the Kharkiv area, and also damning evidence of Russian incompetence. Can't make that stuff up. There's literally proof that they sat there for hours on end, most likely. With that, we're now going to move south of Kharkiv, where we've actually gotten some news that isn't necessarily connected to the front, but we can see that someone was trying to get a calf out of Kharkiv, and they have done something that I would consider ultimate Slavicness. Like, if there was something that I've seen all the time on Russian dashcam footage, as well as Eastern dashcam footage in general of Eastern Europe, it's always people loading calves into the back of their Ladas and then just driving them around. And here we can see that someone from Kharkiv has done this again today, where we can see that they put a calf in the back of a Lada and they're just driving it down the road. Of course, there's music playing, so I can't play it. But I mean, like, if this is all you got, this is all you got. But I've seen this a couple of times before, and I always thought it was a little cute and kind of entertaining to see that someone's transporting a calf around instead of a Lada. So I hope y'all found that a little entertaining as well. I thought that was pretty funny. And so with that, we're now going to move on to the last bit of news we've got near the Kharkiv area, where we can see that apparently the Russians don't like green energy. Apparently they believe that the Ukrainians should be picking up even more alternative energy sources. For example, the Russians are now starting to push burning Russian tanks as a great heat and energy source, as it appears they are now lashing out against the solar panels of the village of Marifa. Here we can see a large crater that's been caused in the middle of the solar panel farm, and we can actually see the depth of the crater as this man attempts to, I guess you could say, scale the crater in and out. We can actually see what appears to be a second one because it's in a different... Well, actually, no. I think that's the same crater. No, it can't be. Apparently, these are two entirely separate craters here in these pictures. But you can tell that the Russians apparently are trying to promote their new energy source, which is Russian anger and Russian coping. Because, of course, we know that the amount that Stalin and Lenin and all of the other former Russian leaders are spending in their graves, they'd be able to power the entirety of Ukraine without Ukraine even needing to burn a single bit of coal or even run a single reactor. And so with that, we're now going to be moving out of the Kharkiv area. We haven't got any news from the front beyond that one small advance that we've seen on video, and we don't know exactly where that occurred on the front lines, and if we did, that would of course be giving away Ukrainian locations, which we do not do here on this channel. So we will be trying to get more updates on what's happening up here near this salient north of Kharkiv, and so with that, we're now going to start moving closer to Izyum, where today we've seen near the village of Balaklia ATGMs used by the 93rd Brigade, and we can see that, of course, they were met with great success. Also, we can see an interesting way of them using it, which is via an ATV, or a four-wheeler. I call these things a four-wheeler. We can see that they've got a little trailer for the four-wheeler, along with all of the pieces for the ATGM. We can now see them setting it up. Now this, I would have to say, is probably the best way I've seen a four-wheeler being used on the front, is to attach some kind of trailer to it and haul around an ATGM. This makes this ATGM crew incredibly mobile. They can move quickly off-road and on-road. They're very small, so their profile is going to be very negligible at best, so it's going to be hard for the Russians to see them, and they can set up anywhere and then pack up and move within probably a very short amount of time. So I think that this is a massive step forward in terms of modern warfare and how ATGM units can be used. And hopefully, this will show that they're being used to great effect. It appears that the rest of this video is nothing more than a watermark, which is interesting to me. But with that, that is the end of the video. Very interesting to see that the 93rd Brigade is, of course, innovating and thinking ahead with the tactics that they're going to be using to now start fielding ATGMs. Of course, carrying them around on foot is very slow, but loading them into a small little trailer that is then packed up onto a four-wheeler will definitely make them much more efficient, much more maneuverable, and in the end, much more effective, helping the Ukrainians in the defense and also the offense. With that, we're now going to move down even further south to the area of Izyum, where, of course, we can see, well, not of course, this isn't really an of course thing, we can see some unfortunate videos of a Ukrainian vehicle being hit near Izyum. This video was taken through infrared footage by Russian forces, and it shows a fast-moving Ukrainian vehicle being hit by what may be artillery or some kind of guided munition strike. Here we can see this vehicle on the move in the tree line. And once it reaches this area in what appears to be a crossroad, it unfortunately gets hit or runs over a mine. Actually, we could see the shell come in. It must have been artillery of a sort. So unfortunately, that vehicle was destroyed. And although I usually discredit Russian videos, I believe the evidence here is pretty solid to say that the Russians actually did destroy a vehicle here on film. So very unfortunate to see, but we do know that the Ukrainians, for every loss they take, they inflict about 9 or 10 losses on the Russians, because that is the current kill-to-death ratio of Ukrainian units lost versus Russian units lost. So the Ukrainians are doing incredibly well in the defensive war, and sadly, every once in a while, they do lose some of their brave and heroic defenders, as we could probably see here on this film. Of course, this never negates the defense that the Ukrainians are putting up and their absolute heroism, bravery, and the actual, I guess you could say, righteousness. That doesn't really sound good, you know, but the righteousness of what they're doing. They are defending their country and their identity as a people. With that, we're now going to be moving on beyond Izyum, because that's all the news we've gotten from there today. It seems like the activity is small. We did hear from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, although I couldn't really get a lot of video evidence to back this up, so I didn't include it, that apparently the Russians conducted a very small attack on a village on the front line, but they were repelled nearly immediately, and the Russians withdrew, suffering heavy losses. So I didn't really include that because, you know, it's a very small fare. It's nothing that's too important to really note. We do have large amounts of news these days, so it's very hard to pick and choose, but that's one of the ones I did omit tonight. We're now going to move to the village of Lyman. We've heard that the Russians have captured the entirety of the city, but some people say that the Ukrainians still hold on to some pieces of it. Here today we can see Russian troops walking around the streets of Lyman, which does let us know that it is certainly contested at best and completely taken at worst. Here we can see them walking down the street. And looking around, you can clearly see the red armbands on all of them, which does mark them as Russians. And with that, that is the end of the video, but we can see that Russian forces are in the village of Lyman. Further outside the village of Lyman, we can actually see the Russians supposedly using the Krasnopol guided artillery in the area of Lyman, trying to hit Ukrainian forces. Of course, I have to mute the video. The Russians put so much copyrighted music in their video, you would be thinking they're trying to piss YouTube off. But of course, they've already been banned off of there. But we can now see what appears to be Ukrainian soldiers moving into this tree line where this drone is looking. We can now see the drone looking at the same part of the tree line. We can see a little bit of movement from what may be Ukrainian soldiers down there on the ground. And we can now see an artillery shell come in. And we can see that one of the soldiers got very fortunate and he actually ran to safety inside of a building. So it appears that while the Russians are claiming that it's guided artillery, it looks like it may have been a little bit off the mark from the actual location the soldiers were at the point that shell landed. But it's very interesting to see that the Russians are using a very limited amount of guided artillery. We do know that their artillery is largely more inaccurate because of the lack of training Russian artillerists have, and also the lack of precision guided munitions that the Russian artillery is able to field. So, by and large, that's one of the rare instances we'll see the Russians using guided artillery, and of course, it's such a rare instance that they had to film it, and they had to show it to the entire world to act like they are an up-to-date and modern fighting force, although they clearly are not. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can once again see the Ukrainians are not running out of supplies, as the MLRS barrages are continuing at a rapid pace. Here we can see another video of another MLRS attack. As we can see the MLRS firing behind this soldier, he's now going to show us the grad that is doing great work. As Starsky would say, this MLRS is turning Russians into good Russians, and I would have to say, in response to that, this MLRS is turning Russians into the best Russians, which is powderized. Or misted, whichever you prefer. Or juiced, I don't know. Anyways, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news from inside of Severodonetsk itself, where we can actually see that the Ukrainians are trying to preempt the worst case scenario if it was to happen, although it does seem that the defense of Severodonetsk is going fairly well right now, but they are evacuating civilians any way they can. Here's a video of the Ukrainian forces evacuating civilians from the city to make sure that they are not going to be in any kind of danger. We can now see a Ukrainian soldier giving an interview. Unfortunately, this video does not have any audio, but we can see it appears that they're using humanitarian aid trucks. I would say they're like kind of like 18-wheelers here in the United States, and they're loading up civilians into the back of them to try and fit as many as possible and get them out of there. We can actually see that they've attempted to make some kind of creature comforts in there. It appears that they've laid down some pallets with blankets on top of them to at least give people something to sit on, which is good to know, that they're not just packing people in there like sardines. But you now see another interview with a Ukrainian civilian. Fortunately, we don't have any kind of idea of what she's saying. There is no audio to this video. So we're going to skip forward through the interviews, and we're now going to get to the part showing how they're evacuating the civilians. And they're pretty much just using the humanitarian aid vehicles as buses. We can see that they're trying to pack them as best they can to get as many civilians out as soon as possible. And hopefully these civilians will make it to safety and will be out of the area of an actual battleground. We know that did not go well for any of these civilians at Mariupol, and we can see that the Ukrainians are taking all the precautions possible and making sure that their civilians stay as safe as possible. I think that's very thoughtful and caring of the Ukrainians, considering that just yesterday we saw Russian forces literally falling short and firing rockets into their own village in the DPR. So, you know, considering that the Ukrainians actually take care to notice their civilians and take care of them, I think that's a very good step up from what the Russians do, which is the opposite. So with that, we're now going to move to our last, I believe, 3 bits of news here in the Donbass area, and then we'll be returning to another question segment. Here in this video, we can see a Luhansk People's Republic MLRS in action. Actually, we can see a battery of them in action. And so here's the video.
Доброе утро, мы из Донбасса. Привет, Авдеевки от Донбасса.
And with that, we can of course see that those rockets are most likely the ones that fell short, and they're releasing the footage today, acting like it was a successful launch. once again, the Russians fall short on a lot of things. Not only do they fall short on the performance of the rockets, but they also fall short in the performance area on many other aspects, but we will not cover that. We're now going to move on to the next bit of news here in the northern Donbass area, the Severodonetsk area as one could say, where we can see that there has been carnage on the T-1302 highway, but the Ukrainians still retain control of this vital network in between Bakhmut and Lysychansk and Severodonetsk. This is one of the major supply routes that the Ukrainians use, and we can see that it has come under fire from the Russians a pretty good bit, but the Ukrainians still valiantly hold on to this highway and are trying to make sure that their supply lines are not threatened by Russian interdiction. So, of course, wonderful to see that the Russians are not on the highway, and they are only a mile and a half away. But the Ukrainians are holding them at bay, and that is wonderful to see. Finally, one thing that we can see that I thought was wild is that we can actually see that the Ukrainians have lost a Bushmaster. Now, this would be kind of sad news if it wasn't for the fact that this is the first one we've ever seen, and it was such a big deal to the Russians, they actually found a way to upload it to the world. We hardly see a lot from the Russians that they put out, but we see things that they are very, very proud about that actually make it out to the international world. And here we can see that they are boasting about a Bushmaster getting destroyed. You know, that'd be cool and all if we knew that Ukraine hadn't already destroyed around 1,000 Tiger armored cars. So it's like, is 1,000 Tiger armored cars really equivalent to one Bushmaster? No. So while it's unfortunate to see the Ukrainian vehicle has been destroyed, putting it into perspective, it's like a drop in the bucket compared to the amount of losses of armored cars the Russians have taken. So with that is the end of the news for the Severodonetsk and Lysychansk area. So we're now going to start moving on to the Donbass area, the rest of the Donbass, the Donetsk region in particular, and also the rest of the Southern Front news we didn't cover earlier in the stream. But before we do, we're actually going to answer another 3 questions from the chat, and then we'll return back to the news. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
Okay, so while we're collecting our very interesting results from that poll to settle a very popular issue in the chat, our first super chat we have is from Cody Baker, who puts in a $20 donation and says, M777 Gunner was the best job I ever had. Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support to the channel. Of course, we rely on it heavily, and we thank you so much for the support. And also, I would have to say that if I was able to pick a job in the military, that would be my go-to job. Matthew can actually tell you that before I found out that I was not fit for military service, I actually have scoliosis. Of course, I'm not like bended up like a pretzel, like I don't have any leaning or anything like that, or any problem like that, but still, it was bad enough that they wouldn't even give me a waiver. But one of my plans earlier in life was actually to become an officer in the U.S. Army and try and get into the artillery. That was my entire plan. But of course, after going through JROTC and also finding out I had scoliosis, that went out the window. So I thank you so much for the support. I thank you for the service, and I'm glad to know that we do have some M777 gunners here in our live chat that can attest to the accuracy and the absolute a brilliant state that the M777 is in. And so I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from another channel regular, Old Salty Squid, who says, hello, Enforcers. Thanks for your recommendation of They Shall Not Grow Old. It was absolutely amazing. Do you have any other recommendations on any other war documentaries? Thanks for all you both do, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and I'm glad that you did enjoy my recommendation. I try and make sure my recommendations are good, and I can't always make them good, but here's some other stuff. I'm a real big World War I fan, well, not really a fan, but I'm a huge buff on it. So another movie to watch, I don't know if you've seen this one, but All Quiet on the Western Front is really good. Great movie. I think they really encapsulated the feeling of World War I in a movie. Also, there's another one. I can't think of the name, but it was in black and white, and it was about the French army, and it was about a mutiny where the French soldiers did not go over the top to attack the anthill. Oh man, Kirk Douglas was in that movie. Kirk Douglas. World War I movie. Paths of Glory. Now, this one isn't really accurate, historically accurate at least, and it was actually anti-war, and when it was released, it got scathing reviews for being anti-war, which was really interesting because the entire perspective has now changed. Now it's normal for war movies to be anti-war. But it was an incredibly interesting movie. It had a lot of nuances in it, and it was also kind of touching on the social problems that the French were having by the late end of the war, where mutinies were common in the military. French soldiers, by and large, would refuse orders, and generally, it was starting to turn into largely just chaos on the front lines for the French. It was really a question of would the French ever actually carry out their orders or not, because they had gotten so war-weary at that point. Also, what's really interesting, not going into too much of an aside on history, but the French, if anyone, have always been the closest to becoming a communist country, if any other country is in that contest in Western Europe. They actually have, actually they were the headquarters of a lot of the internationals, yeah, I believe, how that's pronounced, just making sure. I was thinking in my head if that is the correct way. But that's where all of the communists around the world would meet, and they would usually meet in France. That just lets you know how many communists there were in France historically, and we also saw that kind of cropping up again in World War I, and we had already seen that before with the Paris Commune of 1879, although it is a little questionable if that is considered like what communism came to be in its modern form. It was different in some degrees. I guess you could say it was like the first implementation of communism in any regard in reality, rather than in writing. So it was kind of communist, but at the same time it was really just a revolt. So a very interesting tidbit of history. But Paths of Glory is also a great movie. I see some people in the chat saying A Bridge Too Far. That is also a great movie. There were loads of movies made prior to the 1970s that I would consider golden. If you wanted to go and find war movies, everything made before 1970 is golden. I remember there was one, I can't remember it. It was one with John Wayne in it. It was about the Vietnam War. Let me think about it. John Wayne, Vietnam War. Of course, John Wayne's kind of a controversial person, like not for anything he said. It was the Green Berets. But he's kind of, like, in the modern day, he's not really that great of an actor, because this whole entire thing was a pilgrim, and he just acted like that through everything. So, I think that was a pretty interesting movie, though. I remember it as a very little kid. That was one that made an impression on me, and I still remember the Ballad of the Green Berets. So those are some of my recommendations, and I hope you knock yourself out and you have a lot of fun with them, because I enjoyed them, and hopefully you'll find some enjoyment out of them, too. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. Also, I see a lot of people saying the Green Berets. Thank you so much. That's a really good movie. I'm glad a lot of people agree with me. Big Red One. I think I've seen that one, but I don't really remember it all too well. Turn off your gas light. But that, I think, if I remember it correct, that was a pretty good one too. Hamburger Hill, pretty good one as well. Everyone's got a great recommendation. So honestly, you might want to look through the live chat as well right now, because there are a load of people who are just giving some of the greatest movies. Fury, now Kevin, I'm going to have to disagree with you there. I wasn't a big fan of Fury. There was a lot of inaccuracies there, and also they kind of portrayed the Americans as just flat out war criminals at some points. And while there were, of course, war crimes that were committed by the United States here and there, usually the U.S. command was on top of prosecuting American war criminals. And we actually executed a decent amount of American soldiers for rape and other, I guess you could say high criminal charges, because the American military, much like most Western European militaries, are always trying to make sure that their soldiers stay disciplined and don't go crazy. So unfortunately, I didn't really like Fury. But if you did, of course, everyone's entitled to their own opinions. I just wasn't a big fan of it. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope I did answer that question really well. And with that, Guns of Never. Okay, I can't keep on going, but I thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to move on to the Southern Front news and the speech from President Zelensky.
And last up, we are paid a visit from Dick Cheney. We have a $20 donation from Will Riley, who says, "When I went to the zoo in Mumbai, they had white-tailed deer in the zoo. Dick Cheney said it's not a zoo animal and tried to shoot it. Do you believe whitetail should be a zoo animal?"
A zoo animal in Ukraine?
I think just any zoo.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. Of course, we're always happy to have Dick Cheney in the chat. It's very fun, of course. I love the joke. And to answer that question, white-tailed deer around here are about the same population level as a squirrel here in Alabama where I live. You can find them everywhere. In fact, they're such a normal sight for me growing up, I don't even really notice them or pay much attention to them unless they're standing on the side of a road. Then they've got my attention more so than this war does, because I'm scared they're going to run out in front of my car and wreck the thing. So, white-tailed deer in foreign countries, I could see that actually. Because you got to remember that zebras are much like white-tailed deer in Africa, in some places in the savannah. And so I can kind of see why putting white-tailed deer in a zoo would make a little bit of sense if it's an international zoo. Well, not an international zoo. If it's in another country like Poland or Ukraine, I could see that. I could also see, oh man, what's the name of that thing? Remember that deer? Pronghorn deer, that's what it is. I could also see pronghorn deer from the Midwest and Western United States being snatched up and put into foreign zoos as well, because they're very interesting, and they're also indigenous to the United States, so not a lot of countries see those kinds of creatures. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm sad that Dick Cheney doesn't think they're supposed to be in zoos. Of course, they're just normal game over here for people to shoot and eat. A lot of people hunt deer, and you know, there's a whole bunch of people who say that hunting's bad, hunting's good. I don't weigh in on that. Of course, that's kind of political. But there's a lot of people who do hunt deer over here, especially in Alabama. And so, in the perspective of being an Alabamian, I don't find them zoo-worthy. But of course, internationally, I could see them being in a zoo. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I think pronghorn are deer. I just saw Indigenous Space say they aren't. Pronghorn. Let me pull that up real quick. Pronghorn. The pronghorn. This is a species of artiodactyl mammal. Is pronghorn a deer? Is it even a deer? Pronghorn deer. Though not an antelope. It is not an antelope. It is a deer. I was right. The pronghorn has a deer-like body. What is it? I thought this thing was a deer. I can't get a straight answer. It's telling me it's an artiodactyl. What is an artiodactyl? Is that a deer? Let's see here if we can see deer anywhere in here. And if I don't, I'm going to assume it's not a deer. Oh, gosh. Wow, they made this difficult. As a member, the pronghorn's closest living relatives are the giraffe and the okapi. Oh my god. Well, it's not a deer, that's for sure. So I guess that answers the question. You were right. It's not a deer. I don't know Western animals all too well. I just know stuff that's indigenous to Alabama. But I swore that this thing looked a lot like a deer to me. So with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that answers the question. And I thank you so much, Will Riley, once again for the support. You've helped out this channel a great deal with running. And of course, we appreciate it a huge deal. And so with that, we have now reached the end of this question segment, and we're now going to continue on with the Southern Front news. Of course, we will be skipping over Kherson because we did cover that earlier. That is what gave this video's thumbnail and description tonight, and also the title. So if you would like to catch up on the great successes that the Ukrainians have had today, and you just hopped on the stream, rewind to pretty much the very beginning of the stream, and you will actually see me covering the Kherson news in total, and then just come back up to here. And so with that, we're now going to continue on with the news. Starting off in the Avdiivka area, we can actually see that the Ukrainians have been hitting the Russians today near Avdiivka instead of the other way around. We have seen nothing but Russian artillery bombardments on Avdiivka, and we can now see today that the Ukrainians are getting what they're owed, and they're now smacking a Russian convoy around like it's a stepchild. So we can now see the vehicles moving down the road. It appears that they're mostly main battle tanks, most likely a T-72. Well, that one was a T-72. Now it's dust. We can now see some of the tanks going off the road. We can now see artillery raining down on them all around. We can once again see the massive amount of pot marks, which tells us that this isn't the first time that the Russians have tried to push through this area. This is most likely around the 4th or 5th time they've tried. Operator Starsky actually let me know, and I think he let some of y'all know on stream, that the Russians actually push the same objective over and over and over until they take it, and they push it the exact same way as the first time. And so the way we're seeing these Russian vehicles advance down this road is the exact same way we would have seen them push the first time. As you can see, the artillery pot marks show that this is certainly not the first time. We now see the artillery still raining down on these Russian vehicles, and the crews are certainly sweating if they haven't already hopped out of the tanks and ran. We can now see what appeared to have been a direct hit on one of the tanks, although we can't really tell from here. We can now see one of the tanks starting to move back towards the road, and now we can see one of them moving down the road. We can now see them still advancing down this road, although they have been under artillery fire. We can now see them taking a left turn. We can now see that some more vehicles of this convoy have once again rejoined and are starting to move down the road. And so it looks like the Russians did come under artillery fire, but we couldn't confirm any losses on film. But it is good to see that the Ukrainians, of course, aren't letting the Russians have an easy time in the area, and they were most likely causing, once again, frayed nerves at best, and maybe some cuts and bruises, or some pretty decent shrapnel wounds at best. So with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news further down the Donbass area, where we can see that once again the Russians are barraging the village of Novomikhailivka. I believe that's how that is pronounced today, as we can see more artillery landing on the village. This artillery was apparently fired by BM-21 Grads as well as mortars, heavy mortars. And we can see some of these explosions rocking this village as they are attempting to push the Ukrainians out. But of course, the stalwart Ukrainian defenders have not budged an inch, even with this severe artillery barrage being levied against them. We can now actually see one of the electrical substations they showed off a couple of days ago again, and it looks like they're actually using some recycled footage to try and push the narrative that there was a heavy bombardment today in this village. As we can see, the Russian fire continues to rain down on the village, and we can see that the Russians are indiscriminately hitting every single house that there is. We know that there are most likely civilians still living in the city, and they're, of course, once again, caring as little as possible about the actual amount of casualties and deaths they're inflicting on these poor civilians stuck inside this village. And with that, that is the end of the video. And I was actually thinking for a second, because I saw someone say in the chat, unfortunately I forgot who it was, but someone said that the Russians were losing around 300-something soldiers per day on average so far over the course of this war, with 30,000 dead. And I actually did some searching while that video was going on, that's why I kind of got quiet near the end, to figure out what that'd be comparable to. And so I pulled up American losses daily in World War II and what that average was. And on average, before we move on to the next bit of news, I'm going to give this out because this was really interesting to me. The Americans on average lost 220 soldiers per day on average over the entirety of World War II. The Russians are losing 333 soldiers per day on average in Ukraine. And so the amount of soldiers they are losing right now is a higher loss rate per day than the U.S. was losing in World War II. And that means that the Russians are doing terribly. There's no other way to explain that. If they were to continue on this war for another 4 years, they would have around 500,000 dead alone. And who knows how many wounded? It would at least be over 1 million. So with that, now that we've got that figure in our heads, we're now going to move on to the next bit of news, where we can see the Azov firing an ATGM. Now, I put the name of the ATGM right there, but I'm not sure if YouTube would come down and, like, rip my fingers off for saying the name of that, because it does sound like something else. And so, I will be showing the video here, and we can see that the Azov is using one of the Russian-made and older versions of an ATGM.
Наблюдаешь? По готовности огонь. Дайте ему же бинокль. Зачем? Блин, а где она? Я просто... Стреляем!
We now hear the missile traveling. And we see a little pop.
Попадание, охуеть! Цель наблюдаешь?
And so that is the end of the video, and we can see that even though the Ukrainians are using a much older ATGM, I'm still not going to say the name, because if I slightly mispronounce that, I will literally be drawn and quartered. So we can see them using it, and it appears that they did get an effective hit with the system. So great to see, and it's wonderful to know that the Azov units are still fighting on the front lines, and they still have strong morale, even after they've seen one of their sister units get largely destroyed in Mariupol after nearly an 80-day siege, which was still something for the books, and something to be remembered. With that, we're now going to move further down the front to the area south of Zaporizhia near the town of Vasilivka, where we can actually see some abandoned tanks. Here we can see the Ukrainians walking up on a T-72. We're going to take a look at what kind of T-72 this is here in a second.
Товарищ наводчик, 90 градусов влево, крутим. Цель обнаружена, крути. Да это, блядь, вправо, влево крути. Алло, дебил.
Here we see them messing around with the SPG.
Блядь, ты сейчас дерево сломаешь. Похуй крути. Бля, дерево сломал. Сука.
Открывать огонь.
Да, прям в дерево. Бум, блядь.
Вниз она идет, смотри.
It's kind of cute to hear him messing around like this. Is pretty funny.
Ебать, она высокая пушка. Сука. Развлекуху нашли, я манал.
Стрелять!
Смотри, где мы уже? Мы сейчас по танку ложимся.
Противник!
Патроны заряжай. Где тут патроны? Я их тоже должен снять. Вот патроны.
Опускаем нашу шнягу.
And we can see right over here that the elder tank that was abandoned was a T-72B3, of course missing most of the armor package that a quote-unquote completely modernized T-72B3 would have.
Только я тебе скажу, когда не опускать, потому что ты врежешься сейчас тут в танк.
Буду две крутить сразу.
Пизда. Это все, у него может по кругу не крутится?
Врезались?
Да нет, вроде. Может у него УВН закончились?
Прикол на Москве.
Ну, хорошо.
Да не, по кругу все. Он довольно медленно так. Я задолбался устать.
Я тут все
Могли
навидал.
автоматически прыгнуть.
So we can actually see that I'm assuming they're a couple, maybe a boyfriend and a girlfriend, but they've managed to get a Russian SPG and a T-72B3 main battle tank all to themselves, and we can actually see that the girlfriend was inside the tank, rotating the turret of the SPG to the other tank, and they were literally playing around with these abandoned Russian tanks. Really funny to me, actually kind of cute too. And so I hope that they stay safe through this war, and I hope they had a fun time here, because they were laughing and having a pretty fun time messing around with the tanks. And so with that, we're now going to move into Zaporizhia itself, where today we've gotten some a bit of unfortunate news, but still good to see that the Ukrainians do honor the soldiers who never will make it home, as they do honor some of those fallen dead that have returned from the front lines and will never see the light of day again. Here we can see them honoring 9 soldiers from the Safari regiment that have been killed on the front lines. And we can see everyone taking a knee. Really, I should say it's more like bowing down in respect to these fallen soldiers. Here we can see the truck that is carrying the bodies of these brave men. It's an unfortunate fact of life that while the Ukrainians are on the right side, and they are of course inflicting more casualties on the Russians than the Russians can ever imagine to inflict on them, there is always the unfortunate instance where Ukrainian soldiers will be killed. And this is one of those sad instances. And while it is sad to see that some Ukrainian soldiers have been killed, one always has to remember that they were the most patriotic soldiers that there were out there, and they laid down their lives to defend Ukraine, to ensure that their children would not grow up under Russian tyranny and subjugation. And so, once again, while it is an unfortunate thing to see, I have the utmost respect for these soldiers who will no longer ever see the fruits of their own labors in this war, and hopefully their children will know what their parents did and be very appreciative for their sacrifice for their freedom. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the Zaporizhia area and past the Kherson area, and to our last bit of news before we get to the speech from President Zelensky. Today we've gotten a report, an official report, from the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and also the Coastal Command of the Ukrainian Armed Forces that they have gotten enough Harpoon anti-ship missiles to sink the entire Black Sea fleet. A lot of people have been wondering where these anti-ship missiles that the West has promised have been. Apparently they've been kept secret, and the Ukrainians have slowly been stockpiling them over the past few weeks or maybe even months, as today they have finally made the announcement that the Harpoons are here and they are here to stay. Unfortunately, some of the post was removed, but we can see here that according to the military administration of Odessa, they now have enough Harpoons to sink all of the Russian Black Sea fleet. Good thing to know. And it's good to know that the Black Sea Fleet will probably never get close to Ukrainian shores again, based off of that information. And so, we're now going to wrap up tonight's news with a speech from the most not influential, but the most famous and most revered politician of the modern age. If there was a politician in the world that nearly everyone could get behind, except for the Russians, it would definitely be this man here, President Zelensky. And so here is his speech from day 94 of the war here on May 28th. We can also see him wearing a new shirt, and I have to say I'm a huge fan of it. And so here's the speech.
Українці, українки, наші захисники і захисниці. Завершився 94-й день повномасштабної війни. Ситуація дуже складна. Особливо в тих районах на Донбасі і на Харківщині, де російська армія намагається вичавити хоча б якийсь результат для себе. Ключові напрямки боротьби на фронті – це, як і раніше, Северодонетськ, Лисичанськ, Бахмут, Попасна та інші міста, на яких зосереджений російський наступ. Але наша оборона тримається. Там невимовно складно. І я вдячний усім, хто витримує цей натиск окупантів. Щоденно працюємо над посиленням нашого захисту. Це передусім постачання зброї. Кожного дня наближаємось до того, що наша армія буде переважати окупантів технологічно і ударною силою. Звичайно, дуже багато залежить від наших партнерів, від їхньої готовності надати Україні все необхідне для захисту нашої свободи. І я очікую з цього приводу хороших новин вже наступного тижня. Сьогодні російська армія завдала абсолютно безглуздих, відверто варварських ударів по Сумщині. Ракети, міномети. І для чого? І що це дає? Українці Сумської області, як і будь-якої іншої області нашої держави, вже все зрозуміли про Росію. І новим терором вона нічого не зможе додати. І тим більше не зможе залякати. Внаслідок російського обстрілу Миколаєва сьогодні загинула 1 людина, 7 поранені, 2 у дуже важкому стані. Снаряди вдарили по житловому району. В 20 метрах від дитячого садочка. Ось таких ворогів обрала для себе Російська Федерація. Знову і знову буду нагадувати світу, що потрібно нарешті визнати офіційно Росію державою-терористом, державою-спонсором тероризму. Це просто правдиво, це чесно і відображає ту щоденну реальність, яку окупанти створили в Україні і дуже хочуть понести далі у Європу. І це має бути юридично закріплено. Готуюся до засідання Європейської Ради, яке відбудеться 30-31 травня. Буду звертатись до учасників засідання, зокрема, і про це говоритиму. Про терор, який став на сьогодні фактично єдиною формою дій Російської держави по відношенню до Європи. Терор на землі в Україні. Терор на енергетичному ринку всієї Європи, не тільки нашої держави. Терор на продовольчому ринку. Причому вже в глобальному масштабі. А який терор буде далі? Тільки разом, тільки всі європейці, ми зможемо зупинити таку політику такої держави. Звичайно, у зверненні до Європейської Ради приділю необхідну увагу і тому прогресу в розвитку нашої держави, який вже досягнутий і який може бути досягнутий найближчим часом. Також наступного тижня продовжу звертатись до парламентів європейських країн. Буде і багато іншої міжнародної активності, направленої на посилення нашої держави і на посилення спільного тиску усього вільного світу на Росію. Говорив сьогодні з прем'єр-міністром Британії Борисом Джонсоном про оборонну підтримку і постачання пального в Україну, про те, як можемо розблокувати українські порти, а отже, як можемо не допустити розгортання продовольчої кризи. Окремо обговорили і гарантії безпеки для України. Маємо активізувати роботу над ними. З'являється все більше інформації про те, що окупанти намагаються максимально обмежити виїзд наших людей з тимчасово окупованих районів Херсонської області. Вони не дають жодних гуманітарних коридорів і закрили індивідуальний виїзд людей. Ті, хто впевнений у своїй позиції, таких рішень точно не ухвалював. Однозначно, це прояв слабкості, прояв того, що їм нічого дати людям. Та й люди не хочуть нічого у них брати. Тому вони намагаються взяти людей в заручники. Але Україна поверне все своє. Все. І це обов'язково. І це лише питання часу. І кожного дня цей час звільнення, він скорочується. Ми для цього робимо все. Вічна вдячність і слава усім, хто захищає нашу державу. Вічна пам'ять кожному і кожній, чиї життя забрали окупанти. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelensky for today, and that wraps up the day's news. Of course, the stream is not over. We will be going into the question segment and answer every super chat we've got, and also some live chat questions intermittently between them. And so if you do want to stick around for those, please make sure to. There are some interesting questions, and we may also answer yours as well if you have one. And if you would like to ask a question, which there is a chance that it will be answered, make sure to @ the Enforcer or @ Enforcer Matt, and that will put it on Matthew's register, where he will then take account of it, and then he may actually ask your question. So with that, we are now going to move directly into the question segment, and that was the end of today's news. And so with that, I also want to make sure to let everyone know, if you are leaving and you were only here for the news, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we do run these streams every single day of the week at 10 p.m. Eastern Time, and tomorrow we'll be running our Sunday night fundraiser. Of course, it'll have a lower goal than normal, because I do want to make sure that people do not feel too pressured. We have set very high goals for about 10 to 11 weeks in a row, and so I do want to make sure that people do not get exhausted. And so with that, we will now be going into the questions. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up, we have a $20 donation from Zyper Sniper 1, who is a channel legend, as many of you know by now. He says, if this war keeps going, then Russia won't have any army left by the end of the year. Keep it up and give them hell, Ukraine, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, Cyber Sniper. And I do have to agree that if this war was to continue on till the end of the year, the Russians are going to be in dire straits for sure. I don't even think they would be in fighting condition. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I do have to agree with that assessment. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and I thank you so much for the support and being a long-time supporter of this channel. Without support from folks like you, this channel couldn't keep on running these streams. And so I thank you once again, and with that, we're moving on to the next question.
Okay, and moving on, we have a $20 donation from Greg Carmen, who says, I can donate every night, but I appreciate your efforts. Thank you, and Slava.
And I thank you so much for the support. And it's okay if you can't support every night. While of course support is very important to keeping this channel running, I don't want to make anyone feel like they're pressured to support us. One thing though is that we do not run ads, and I always have to brag about that because I feel like it's a shining moment. Because whenever I go on anyone else's videos on YouTube, no matter what channel they are or what they're covering, it's always double ads, double unskippable ads, and I cannot stand that stuff because I feel like I'm watching live. I feel like I'm watching normal television at that point with how many ads there are. So I never run a single ad on either my streams or my summary videos because I find them annoying. And if people want to make sure that my content keeps going, they can support it. But rather than that, I'm not going to bother people with it. So I thank you so much for the support. Of course, it helps keep our channel running, but do not feel pressured. If you would like to help out this channel, clicking the like button is one of the best ways to help us out. It does help us to reach more people, and it helps us to, of course, get the news out to others. Also, another way that you could support this channel is by spreading the word. Now, that's something I've seen here and there, and I wish people would do more. We have an incredible community of people here on this channel. I think it's the best in the entire YouTube world. I've never seen people who are as nice and caring as the people here in the Leaf Spring Army. And I wish that a whole bunch of y'all would just go out and spread the word about this thing and bring people in who are interested in this stuff, because surprisingly, while this is one of the largest streams on YouTube about the war in terms of live audience viewership per night, the word doesn't spread about it a lot. So if you would like to help out, just pop on Reddit or Twitter and just start talking about the Enforcer YouTube channel and how if you want to know about the news of the war, go check them out. And so I thank you so much for the support once again. It does help us out a lot. And if you would like to help us out, but you don't really feel like it's something that you can do through a super chat, there are many ways, like the ways I've said right there, that you could always help us out. And we're appreciative for any kind of support we can get, whether it be through super chats for the fundraisers, or just spreading the word about the channel, or hitting the like button. And so with that, I thank you so much once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And Enforcer, just real quick, I'm seeing multiple people asking the same question here. Have we decided on tomorrow's fundraiser yet?
Actually, we usually do not decide on the fundraiser until tomorrow. I usually make that decision around the middle of the day when I'm making my summary as I'm compiling my news, and it's based off of what we're seeing on that day. For example, if we're seeing a lot of civilian casualties, usually we try and pick some kind of organization that's focused on medical aid. If we see a lot of action with soldiers, we're always trying to find something that will support the soldiers, although that's one of the hardest nonprofits to find. One of the few we found so far is Razom, for Ukraine, and also Revive Soldiers of Ukraine. So those will be the two under that pick. But it generally depends on the kind of news that we're getting that day. And if it's news showing a certain trend in general, we then try and find a nonprofit that revolves around that trend, if y'all see what I'm saying. So it's kind of more of like a it's kind of more of a decision that I make as the information comes in, instead of something I plan in advance, because I want to make sure that the actual news supports the fundraiser, so that way it doesn't seem detached, because we could be supporting refugees through like UNICEF, say, and then at the same time all of the news we get that day is of civilians being butchered by the Russians inside of Ukraine, and so it seems like our support is ill-placed because it's going to people who don't necessarily need it on that day, if y'all see what I'm saying. So I hope that answers the question for everyone who's concerned. We will have information on that tomorrow, and you'll definitely find out on the stream. So with that, I thank you all so much for being concerned, and that would be my answer to the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Okay, and up next we have a $25 donation from Yoli H, who is one of our channel regulars for quite some time, and says, Enforcer, would Ukraine enlist women to train for military like other countries after this war? Or is it optional right now?
I think the by and large principle around the entirety of the world is that if military service is mandatory for anyone, it's only for men, and then women have the option to serve or not. Of course, there is a couple of exceptions. For example, Israel is one of those certain exceptions. We know that they require both men and women to serve. Once if they're physically fit to. So I'm not sure if the Ukrainians would do that. I feel like the Ukrainians would most likely make it optional service for women. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. I don't really have a lot of information to base that off of, though, so take it with a grain of salt, but I'm assuming that that most likely be the direction that the Ukrainians would head in post-war. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Jake Brooks, who says, Enforcer, do you think it's significant that the 90-day contract just ran out in the recent days? I'd expect a lot of Russians sort of bailed this week.
I think it may be significant, but I think that they'll just replace those soldiers with either other contract soldiers, which I don't really think they have much left, or conscripts, and then just say they're on training exercises, which is their usual excuse. So while it may be big, then again, you know, the Russians aren't really obliged to uphold their laws. They could just say, "Hey, listen, your 90-day contract's up, but you're staying here, or we'll shoot you." You know, they could say that. So, I think it could be a big deal, but we don't really have enough information to actually go in any direction. So pretty much everything I said was an assumption going in multiple directions. Unfortunately, I would actually have to declare ignorance on answering that question because I just don't have enough information to give an answer I'd be happy with. So I thank you very much for the support. I'm sorry I can't really give you a concrete answer on that because of the lack of information. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Greg Carmen, who says, M777 is very impressive, but what are the results downrange?
Well, the results downrange from what we know with the M777 are nearly dead-on accurate every single time. Every single time we've had footage of an M777 firing and then video of its actual effects downrange, it nearly hits every single vehicle it fires at dead-on. We actually know that an M777 in the Severodonetsk area... No, I'm sorry, correction. I believe it was near the Kharkiv area, actually hit a 20-kilometer long shot, which is around 12 miles distance, and it hit the tank it was aiming for on the first shot. So if that tells you how accurate the M777 is, it is incredibly accurate. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, and we have definitely got that pudding. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from a channel legend, William Allen, who says, I'm a member of the Leaf Spring Army, waiting for my Enforcer Wants You for the Leaf Spring Army t-shirt. And actually, William, it's funny that you mentioned that because I actually have a mock-up of that exact design on my computer right now that I've been working on. If most of you don't know how the process works, which probably not because we rarely ever mention it, we create a ton of different designs for our merch, and we go through and we like select one design out of like 10 or 15 to actually use on the merch store, so that way it's the top quality. But yeah, I actually have that design in the queue, so it's possible that might be our next limited edition run.
But we're not going to give anything away further than that. Just know that the next merchandise drop is going to be really good. So hopefully Matthew didn't cue y'all in too much, but with that, I thank you so much for the support. Matthew kind of answered that question a little too much. I'm actually going to have to take him out behind the barn and put him down here in a minute. But with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
Okay, and let's see here. Up next, we have a $20 donation from another channel legend, Zyper Sniper 1, who says, Coffee Fund for Enforcer and Matt, keep up the great work. Imagine Ukraine kick out the Russians on all fronts on day 100, and Slava Ukraine.
Hey, and I thank you so much for the support. It helps out this channel a lot, and I do thank you so much for supporting our coffee fund. We've had loads of people come through and carry through the coffee fund. Sadly, some of them are gone, but never forgotten. I always remember everyone who's always helped out this channel and been longtime viewers. But it does seem that some people do get tired of hearing about the war and they do move on. I hate to think about that though, but I do thank you so much for the support and carrying on the legacy of the coffee fund, which I don't think will ever die and it will always stay around. So I'll make sure with those funds to get myself some nice Starbucks Pike Roast K-Cups and to get myself a little bit of creamer as well, because you never want to be too fancy, but you always want to just have a little bit of class and get some creamer. And so I thank you so much for the support. And also, could you reread the last part of that, beyond the coffee fund?
Let's see here. Imagine Ukraine kick out the Russians on all fronts on day 100.
Now, I think that would be pretty tough to do. They have a lot of ground to cover, but just imagining that, that would be the funniest thing ever. And I would have to agree. I would love to imagine that. Honestly, that would be pretty funny. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And real quick, just to answer Mycroft's question in the comments, he was asking if there's an avenue to submit merch ideas. Yes, if you want to send me a message on Discord, I am Enforcer Matt on Discord. I might not be able to respond to everybody because I get a ton of messages from you all in the Discord chat, but I will certainly take a look at it and put it on my list, and potentially it might become our next limited edition run. So feel free to send me your ideas whenever you feel like it. And with that being said, we're moving on to our next super chat, which is from Willness, who puts in a $20 donation and says Lithuanian citizens raise 5 million euros to buy Bayraktar TB2 for Ukraine. Please bring back Leaf Spring merch. I couldn't afford it at the time.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and it is great to hear that the Lithuanians have pulled together and managed to get Ukraine another Bayraktar. Of course, the Ukrainians can never get enough of Bayraktar. Of course, that's why there's that song Bayraktar. Dun, 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 dun. But anyways, I thank you so much for telling us that information. I think I heard that today a little bit, but I didn't hear it enough to put it on the news. Also, another thing is that we will, well, I can't really, just know it is on the horizon. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address all parts of the question. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have another donation from William Allen. He puts in a $100 donation this time and says, here's some jack to help in t-shirt cost. I was in advertising and publicity NCO in the U.S. Air Force, recruiting, and know this stuff ain't cheap. Whoop.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, William Allen. That kind of massive support helps out our channel a great deal. Honestly, I can't even tell you how much it helps us out. It helps us to keep on running these streams, thinking to the future, and keep everything running behind the scenes. Something that a lot of people don't know, on stream, and, and every once in a while I do have to say this because I have to give Matthew me a little bit of credit here. Behind the scenes, this thing is kind of running a little bit like a machine. Like, there is a set schedule that everything happens. Like, on my time, I'm actually in Central Time, not Eastern Time. At 12 o'clock, midday, I sit down and I create the summary. The summary will then go up usually an hour later. I then sit there for about the next 30 minutes to an hour or two, depending on how many comments come through, and I respond to every single comment I physically can. Then I eat supper. Y'all are probably going to start figuring out, what the hell is he eating supper at 3:30 for? But I eat supper around 3:30. I sit there, I come back downstairs, I sit here and have like a powwow time to either respond to comments or do whatever I want. It's really free time for the next about hour and a half. Then I go and take a shower, and then I come back down, and by the time it's 6:30, I sit down and I'm working for the rest of the night on this stream in particular. Nothing else. I'm trying to find all the news and put this stuff together, and by that time, the news has been put together. Then it's about 10 minutes before the stream when all this is done. Matthew comes down, he hops on his computer, we get in a Discord call, and we sit here for about 5 minutes before the stream starts talking about stuff. We then put the stream live, and then we sit there in the chat for about 10 minutes while the timer's going down, because everything's done at that point. We're just letting everyone get in the room, and we talk to everyone. I try and talk to as many people as I can. Sometimes I'm doing other things because something pops up and I'm trying to fix it. And so then the stream starts, and I'm sitting here doing this for the rest of the night. And then once the stream ends, I sit here for another hour, and I look over all kinds of stuff with the analytics and things like that. And then I also go and respond to everyone's comments then. And so usually I'm done working around 1 o'clock at night, every single night. So in that regard, this thing runs like a stream. Not a stream, a machine is a better way to say it. And so just going off of that kind of support helps me to keep on making sure that the machine keeps running, because it takes a lot of time a day, a minimum of 9 hours or 8 8 to 9. Well, it's really like 8.5, but usually it just gets rounded up to 9. And then if I respond to comments, it can go up to like 12. So I thank you so much for the support. It helps us to keep on doing that kind of stuff, and it goes a long way. I can't even tell you how appreciative we are of that kind of support, and it is time is definitely not cheap, and I thank you so much for helping us to continue on doing this. And so thank you so much once again for the support, William. And with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $33 donation from John Boyer, who says, will the long-range missile systems from the United States open the door for another European allies to follow suit with own shipments? Enforcer and Enforcer Matt Rock, Ukraine has esprit de corps, Slava President Zelensky, and Slava Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support, John Boyer, and also the words of support and encouragement to all of the leaders around the world, and also, of course, the Ukrainians who are carrying on this fight right now. And to answer that question, I'm not really sure if sending over U.S. MLRSs will open up the door for other European countries to send more stuff. I feel like the United States actually gets a bad rap about the support we're sending over, although in terms of the actual monetary support we've sent, as well as the actual monetary tag of the military actual aid we've sent over in terms of military aid, we've sent over more than the rest of the world combined by leaps and bounds, by like a multiple of 3. And so I think that it would open the door where other countries would consider sending over stuff, but at the same time, not many countries can compare to the United States in terms of its economic abilities, and and then in turn that actually comes out in performance of how much equipment can we send over. So I think it would open up the door for the United States to try and push the envelope a little bit further and send over more stuff of its own. But in actually materializing in other countries sending over stuff, I'm not particularly sure. So I thank you very much for the support, John. I hope that answers the question. And of course, everyone's support is greatly appreciated. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, one of our channel regulars, Mycroft, puts in a $20 donation and says, the troops are trained on artillery. I notice no one is wearing hearing protection. Can you analyze this in future streams and give an analysis? It seems unlikely that the U.S. forgot to emphasize this based on my military experience.
Well, thank you so much for the support, Mycroft. And to answer that question, I've noticed that they haven't been wearing hearing protection as well. But one thing that I'm thinking is that maybe they just don't care. I mean, maybe they're fine with getting like permanent tinnitus. I don't know. But I feel like hearing protection would be pretty standard. Of course, I don't think infantry wears hearing protection, because, of course, that could make it even harder to hear orders because the battlefield's loud, and then putting deafening on your ears may make it even harder to hear commands. So I think the infantry wouldn't wear hearing protection, at least from an assumption. I don't have anything to back that up with rather than what I think would be logical. But as far as the artillery, I don't know why they're not, but I think that is something interesting to look into, and I might ask Starsky if he can get an answer for that to that question for us before we run into Sunday Night Fundraiser, or we might try and ask him about that question tomorrow. So I thank you very much for the support. Unfortunately, I don't actually have an answer for it, but I hope that we can get an answer to that question. And so with that being said, we're moving on to the next one, and I thank you once again so much for the support, Minecraft. You have been around helping out this channel for quite a while. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from Koala Resistance, who says, Enforcers in Desert Storm, United States did not lose a tank in 43 days. Only one loss to friendly fire. If Ukraine had M1 Abrams, would you think Russia would be deterred, or the battlefield would look completely different?
Now, while the M1 Abrams was not destroyed during the Iraq War, one does have to consider that they were versing up against the dated Iraqi tech. The best things that the Iraqis had, I believe, were T-72Bs at best. So they didn't really have a lot of good stuff to pull off of in the first place, and so that may be the reason why no Abrams were really lost. For the modern day, while I do trash on the T-72B3 and the T-80s a decent bit, they supposedly do have slightly upgraded guns, and they also have the ability to fire higher power munitions, so they may be able to cause trouble for the Abrams, but at the same time, that may be a very large assumption to make, because we've seen that most of the Russians' hype is literally just that. It's just hype, and there's really nothing to back it up. So the Abrams could probably do fairly well over there, But I would really honestly just have to wait and see once they get on the ground what their performance actually is to then actually make a clear assumption on whether it would do well or not, because I'm kind of flying blind with that answer. I don't really know a lot about the M1 Abrams protective armor and capabilities, and so sadly there's not a lot of public information on that, so I really don't have an idea on how well that tank would actually perform, sadly. But I hope that we could get an answer to that question in the future. Hopefully the United States will send some over, and we can see how well a modern M1 Abrams will perform on the battlefield. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope I kind of answered that question in a way. Really, honestly, I think we need some actual tanks sent over there to see how they would perform. And of course, that would give the United States a great idea of what East versus West will look like if a war went hot in between NATO and the Russians, or the CSTO as a whole. So with that, I hope I kind of answered the question a little bit, and I thank you very much for the support. It's highly appreciated, and of course, that support keeps this channel running. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, another channel legend, Junebug72, puts in an $18 donation and says, just putting positive words out there to gain more power. Ukraine will win. In the meantime, sincere prayers for all affected. Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava. Thank you, the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt.
Now, thank you so much for the support, Junebug. Of course, you are one of our biggest. I really, honestly, I would call you a cheerleader because you are hyped up every single night, and I love it. Honestly, like we look for you in the chat. We're like, "Where's Junebug? There's Junebug," and like it's really cool, honestly, because you're a huge fan of the channel, and we always appreciate our huge fans. It really makes our days very good to know that a lot of people do appreciate it, and that we have people out there who just absolutely adore this stuff. And so I thank you once again so much for the support, and I do think that the Ukrainians will win. Just give it a little bit of time. Give the Russians about another 2 months, maybe 2 or 3 months, and we'll see that the situation will be entirely in Ukraine's favor, as we can already see that this thing is largely petering out. And the Russians are putting everything they can into this small offensive here near Severodonetsk to just try and eke out something. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support once again. It helps us out a huge deal, and I'm very thankful for it. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from another channel legend, Hoodoo Texas, who says, I just read that Lithuanian citizens raised $5 million online to purchase a Bayraktar for Ukraine. I assume it's true because in World War II, this was a common practice for citizens or groups to do this.
That is true, and I don't doubt it one bit. We actually got some news like that earlier. I'm not sure if you said Ukraine, but we heard it was Lithuania in an earlier super chat. So, oh, excuse me. Jeez, I almost choked on my spit. But I thank you so much for the support. I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. I think it did happen because we've gotten a couple of news sources saying that today, and hopefully the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense can confirm that here in the future, as they'll hopefully get that Bayraktar delivered to them soon. And so, of course, we're looking forward to that. Of course, we don't do any kind of massive fundraising like that here on this channel. We do as much as we can, but it's always focused around a nonprofit, so that way we can do it through the YouTube Give system, so that way no one knows it's a scam, but then the bots still come through and call it a scam. So, you know, but anyways, I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment. And so with that, thank you once again, and we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Walker Scott, who says, Enforcer, multiple choice question, is the Russian army the second most powerful military in A, the world, B, Eastern Hemisphere, C, Europe, or D, Ukraine?
I would have to say that it's not the most powerful in any of those categories. I'd have to go with E, which is none of the above, because they're getting beat by the Ukrainians. Which tells us that they're not powerful enough to be a major military power in the Eastern Hemisphere. We already have a military history of the Russian Federation to show that that's true in the Chechen Wars and also in their invasion of Georgia. So they're not the most powerful in the Eastern Hemisphere, which automatically disqualifies them for being the second most powerful in the world. I would say, honestly, they're very third rate. I mean, like, I wouldn't even think I wouldn't even believe that they are the most powerful within their own borders. I think that the Chechens might be more powerful than the Russians, per se. Well, the Kadyrovite Chechens, not the normal Chechens. So I thank you very much for the support, and I think that would be the way I'd answer that question, because I just don't think that the Russians are a competent military force. They don't have the economy to back it up, nor the actual military as we can see right now. And so thank you very much for the support, and I hope I answered that question to the best of my abilities. And with that being said, we're on to the next one.
Okay, and next up we have a $10 donation from CH, who says, once Ukraine wins and the war ends, will they be able to join NATO? Also, on day 100, it would be really cool if you could make a quick compilation of our favorite videos. Example, Mr. Lunchtime, Soldiers, Yay.
I think I might try and do that. Day 100, let me think of when that is. That's 6 days from now. Let me get on my calendar real quick and take a look at that. 6 days from now would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be Friday of next week. So I think I could do that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I think I'll take that into consideration if possible. I think there should be something big for day 100. So I will definitely try and see about pulling something together for the 100th day to put at least within the intro. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. I hope that does answer the question, and I will be looking into that. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Stop the BS, who says, Enforcer, next donation night for a drone, ? That might be a record effort.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but sadly, I don't do any fundraising off of the YouTube Give program. The one reason why is because I feel like there are a lot of people out there still that are trying to run scam fundraisers. I remember back when we started fundraisers, and we still have the occasional one that comes through every once in a while, and they'll say something like, hey, I'm a huge fan of your channel. Could you fundraise for me to buy a drone so that way I can fly over to Ukraine and use it? And I'm like, what? You know, and it's like, and like, not to, like, these people may be well intentioned or something, but it's very questionable. It's like I'm fundraising for a private individual I know nothing about to just give them the money, and then they're supposedly going to do what they say they're going to do. And I find that very questionable. So I only run fundraisers through the YouTube Give program, so that way everyone can have assurance that YouTube is actually operating the fundraiser. So hopefully, you know, of course, YouTube's doing their end of the bargain. They're actually managing the money and sending it where it should be. So the whole entire process is safe. It's not scammy. And, you know, it's something that people can trust, you know, because it's being operated by YouTube. So unfortunately, I don't think I'd be able to fundraise for a drone because I don't know of any nonprofits out there that buy drones. But still, I wish I could do that. But sadly, I think I'm limited to where I can. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope that weighs in as to the limitations this channel kind of faces with its fundraisers. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from James Lynn, who says, AH-64 pilot friend of mine told me today that they do the loft the rockets drill, but AH-64s have pylons that pivot. The Russians don't hand. That's why they have to pitch the helicopters really high.
Interesting. I actually didn't know that myself, and so I thank you very much for sharing that information with us, because that lets us know that even Western helicopters are even better than Russia's best helicopters, you know, AH-64 versus Ka-52/Mi-28. So it's good to know that the Western helicopters like the Apache still outperform the Russian helicopters, and so we know that they would do a much better job at the kind of warfare we see today. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that, we're on to the next question. But before we do, Matthew, how many super chats do we have left?
So it looks like we currently have about 10 left.
All right. So with that, I'm actually going to be putting... no, we're not going to put a cutoff on them. We're going to let them continue. If anyone would like to support the channel, feel free. I was about to put a cutoff on it, but I think we'd have enough time to answer a few questions if a few more super chats are sent in. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $10 donation from Mike D, who says, what can I say to someone who is against the $40 billion in aid package to help Ukraine when they say we have problems here? I'd like to intelligently express the importance of what we are doing and why.
Well, I would explain it this way. Of course, people who are kind of like, who say that may be set in what they're thinking. But if you were wanting to kind of like give a sales pitch as to why that 40 billion should go over there, I would give these few points. Number one, this is ensuring that America's strategic interests are secured in Eastern Europe, which is vitally important to the defense of our European allies and will ensure economic stability for the United States in the upcoming future, and also put us at a strategic advantage over the Russians if, per se, a conventional war, was to break out in between our rival, the Russian Federation, and the United States. The second point I would give would be, let me try and think, that, if the debate is that there's problems at home that money could fix, my answer would be that those problems can probably not be fixed by money, because for the dawn of time, every single country on earth has tried to fix homelessness, poverty, famine, and all of the elements of society, and I've never seen a single one of them succeed. And so if that $40 billion actually was able to fix hunger and poverty in the United States, I would be blown away, because no amount of money before has ever fixed that problem in any way, shape, or form. No matter how much we try, it's always going to be a persistent problem. So that kind of argument would be like saying, let me try and think of a good comparison here. That kind of argument would be like saying, oh, if I had a broken carburetor in my car, pouring castor oil over it will fix it. It won't, because it's never done that before over the course of history. That's kind of a poor analogy, honestly, but hopefully it makes a little bit of sense. But those are kind of the two arguments I would make, because everyone's always talking about, oh, we need to focus on what's going on here at home. But the problem is that you really can't do that in the United States position anymore, because we are literally the almost undisputed world superpower right now, who's trying to project our interests across the globe. And just because of our position and also our economic scale, we have to ensure that things internationally are going in our favor to ensure that we can continue to live the kind of lives we live here, by ensuring that our spheres of influence are maintained. So I mean, of course, someone's going to probably say, who cares about sphere of influence? We should stay here anyways, and if they do, it's like, well, you can think what you think, but it's still important in terms of playing this large international game that every country is involved in. So I kind of hope that answers the question in a way, at least like some arguments I would bring up. Of course, if someone doesn't accept an argument, never sit there and go to name calling. Just sit there and go, okay, well, you think what you think, I think what I think. I guess we'll just agree to disagree or something, because even though it is a huge deal, there's really nothing to ever really get in a huge fight over. Just be like, I guess they don't know. But never say that out loud either, because while someone can of course be misguided, never say that, because that's always just prodding someone and getting them into a fight. Just be like, I guess we'll agree to disagree or something. But I hope that kind of helps you if you want to give someone a sales pitch as to why the 40 billion is important. And also, it's incredibly cheap. And that's another point. I guess that'd be a third point. In Iraq, we spent $2 trillion in Iraq to hold down a country that we then left and then descended into chaos for a short while, and then we had to go back over there and try and fix the problem. And in Afghanistan, I think we spent like $4 to $6 trillion in Afghanistan in total. And so based off of that and how little we actually got out of both of those wars, $40 billion to Ukraine to literally enhance our position by a massive margin in Eastern Europe is a steal of a deal, honestly, when you really think about it in the monetary price tags, because $2 trillion and we got nothing out of it, and $6 trillion and we got nothing out of it, versus $40 billion and we potentially get one of the second largest countries in Europe as a NATO ally and in our sphere of influence. That's a bargain right there, if I've ever heard of one. And so I hope that's a third argument that you bring up, and I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from William Arens, who says, Enforcer, are you concerned that USA neocons, led by such old foreign policy establishment types, such as Kissinger, could be acting as a fifth column for Putin, suggesting Ukraine should negotiate now?
It could. I mean, the thing is that I didn't even know Kissinger was alive until they said he said something. I was like, what? He's still alive? Honestly, I wouldn't really put too much stock into it. I don't know if the guy's even got anything to pull with anymore. He may just be an old guy out there just rambling, and someone, put it on national news. But the point of this war is that Ukraine is not going to compromise its national sovereignty or any of its territory to appease the Russians. That's a stupid point to make, and historically, this kind of appeasement never ends well, and it just prolongs the inevitable, which will be the Russians trying to annex the entirety of the country. And so I think that people like Kissinger, I don't even know what kind of political affiliation he has, so I'm not talking about this politically, I'm just talking about this from the Russian standpoint with the war. It's a stupid point, because historically there's no basis to say that that would work. So I think, honestly, if this Kissinger fella, whoever he is, saying this stuff, he's talking out of his rear end, because there's no precedent to show that that kind of compromise ever actually works. He's almost like, I would say he's like a modern Neville Chamberlain with that kind of talk. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that answers the question. And with that being said, we're going to move on to the next one. And before anyone says you don't know who Kissinger is, nah, not really. I never really paid attention to the guy. You got to remember, I don't really weigh my opinions a lot on what other people say. I just kind of think what I think. I look at history, and, based off of that, I make my decisions. That's why some people hop on here and they say, dude, you're saying something totally different than all the other YouTube channels. Yeah, that's because I don't look at them, and like, while this sounds rude, I don't really care what they have to say, because I can have my own opinions, and I don't need verification from anyone else. Because I've largely been right with most of the opinions I've had so far. And so I've got no reason to question that now. So I don't really care about what Kissinger says. The Ukrainians have to continue to pursue this war and try and regain their territory. And so with that, once again, I thank you very much for the support. I hope that also weighs in on my personal opinion on what the Ukrainians should do. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Randy Turner, who says, Enforcer, how much artillery, including MLRS, would Ukraine need to match the Russians on the front line in the Donbass region?
Oh man, I hate these number questions. I mean, like, it's a great question, but the problem is that I always dread them, because we don't really have any numbers of how many MLRSs the Ukrainians currently have, or the Russians, and how many the Russians actually have active in the theater, and how many Ukrainian has active in the theater. So sadly, that's a question I really can't answer, because there's no actual figures for me to work off of to say how many they would need. Of course, one would have to assume that Ukraine would need and want as many artillery pieces as they can get to try and outdo the Russians or match them. But sadly, I don't have a figure to go off of to actually give a hardcore answer. So don't think I hated the question because it was stupid or anything. I just hate it because I never can give an answer to, like, number games questions, because there's hardly any numbers out there for me to work off of with those. But I do thank you so much for the support. It was a very good question. It's just unfortunate that we don't have any figures to work off of, and so sadly, I'm going to have to declare ignorance and say I can't actually answer that and be confident in the answer. So thank you very much for the support. And it always helps out this channel, and I hope you can understand that there's just not enough information out there for me to answer that one. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Steve Kai, who says, Glory to Ukraine, and God bless the soldiers of Ukraine.
And I thank you very much for the support, and I do have to agree, Slava Ukraine, and God bless those soldiers who are brave, valiant, and they're doing their job. And I was thinking today about what brave is, and not to go on to a too long of a side, but there's a couple of versions of what people think bravery is. And some people think bravery is having no fear whatsoever, like no hesitation, no fear within you, and you just go out there and you do what has to be done. And I kind of feel like that's kind of entering the area of foolhardy. And I feel like bravery really, in my opinion, is being scared to the living daylights. I mean, like, you were scared beyond belief, but you know what has to be done, and you still do it without hesitation. I think that's what bravery is, because if you're foolhardy, you just do it. I mean, like, there's nothing that is telling you shouldn't do it. Being brave is knowing that it's dangerous, but knowing it has to be done and doing it anyway. So, like, thinking about that, that's kind of how I'm classifying the Ukrainians. I know those Ukrainian soldiers, while looking calm and collected, are most likely scared to death, as any reasonable person would be. But they are still stepping up, they are keeping their cool, and they're defending their country sometimes to their last breath, like we saw in Zaporizhia today with that a procession. And so with that, I hope that kind of answers what I think about the Ukrainian soldiers. I think they are certainly some of the bravest soldiers out there, and they continue to do things that no one thought they could. And so with that, we're moving on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Andrew Reese, who says, do you think if the Ukrainians left large amounts of alcohol near the front line, if it would degrade Russian combat effectiveness?
I think it would, actually. We know that the Russians are already sauced. We got that information from Starsky, and then right afterwards, we got enough information to show that there was like vodka bottles in nearly every Russian vehicle. But I think if the Ukrainians were leaving like raw alcohol out there all over the place, I mean, like, honestly, this is, I don't know if this is a war crime, but they could poison the stuff, and they could probably get a couple of Russians that way. But still, I mean, like, just getting them snockered, that's definitely something they could do. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. We already know they're stealing sugar, so I don't feel like it'd be much of a stretch for them to steal vodka or any kind of alcohol like that as well. And so I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Michael Sachinsky, who says, what do you think of Henry Kissinger's comments on Ukraine giving up the Donbass for peace? I thought he was dead.
I didn't even know who he was, really. I've never really cared. To answer that question, I don't think that's a smart move. I've kind of covered that one before in an earlier super chat, but I think that's a stupid move. That's appeasement. We know that appeasement doesn't work. We've seen that in World War II. And that's a perfect example of how appeasement doesn't work, and that's literally what he's asking for here. And if you look through history, it's never a viable principle. They will always come back and try and complete their objectives later on because they actually made some leeway the first time. And so with that, I hope that answers the question in brief, and I thank you very much for the support. I think this Kissinger fella, whoever he is, he doesn't really sound like he's talking with a lot of common sense, much like a lot of people at the top do. I mean, like, a lot of people at the top are always saying they're talking about, oh, Ukraine's going to fall any day, and like, the information coming out does not back that up, but they just continue to say this stuff with absolutely no basis to say it, rather than they just want to say it. And I feel like this is what this Kissinger guy is doing. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Captain Chris1220, who says, hey, Enforcer, what is the most surprising thing to you so far in the war?
Well, the surprising thing to me is the absolute incompetence of the Russian forces. Of course, with the hype that went into this war, and even with me knowing that the Russians weren't as good as everyone was making them out to be historically, based off of the Chechen Wars and the Georgian invasion, I still assumed that they would be well put together at this point, nearly 30 years after the Russian Federation came to be, and they would actually have some level of competence in them. But still, 3 months later, we still see the Russian armed forces are largely incompetent. They lack logistical abilities, they lack training, they lack modern vehicles, good maintenance, they lack everything. And that's what surprised me the most. Because while I knew within the first week of the war the Ukrainians had this thing generally under control and their defensive would work well, it's still surprising me how incompetent the Russians really are. So I think that's honestly the most surprising thing I've seen over the course of this war, is just how terrible, how piss poor the Russian forces are. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from 21 Grams, who says, please show some love to Ukraine and Enforcer by typing what country you're from in the chat and hitting the like.
And I thank you very much for doing that. We're now about to have a spam, which is okay. I'm fine with that. And I do thank you very much for saying that, because we're about to get a very interesting montage of where everyone in the Lee Spring Army is from. Also, like I've seen some people saying here in the chat, whoever he is, Henry Kissinger was the Secretary of State during the Nixon administration. The thing is that while, of course, I'm a huge history buff, I honestly don't care about the guy. I mean, there's tons of people out there right now in the U.S. government on both sides of the aisle, and I'm not going to talk about this politically, but they all have their opinions, and when I listen to them, they sound goofy. And so I don't really put a lot of credit into them because it sounds nonsensical. It doesn't make any sense when you actually look into it. And honestly, I put all of them into that category, regardless of where they're from or what they did. A lot of them and what they say up there in the political sphere just doesn't make any sense when you actually look at it logically and how things work. So you know, that's why I don't really know who he is, and that's why I don't really care. And then he comes out and says senile stuff like this. Like, you know, like, and at the same time, you know, some people are asking that I give him a little bit of respect, but I don't give Neville Chamberlain any respect. You know, I know he's long dead and he's British, and so, you know, of course, there's not any sort of connections with him, at least in people's opinions. But at the same time, I mean, like, he made poor decisions. He had some experience under his belt. Let's pull up Neville Chamberlain real quick. And I'm not going to try and make this too long, but he does have some experience in his life as well. You see, he was born in 1869. So, you know, he lived through the late Victorian era. Let's see here. Come on, let's get to his early life. He entered into politics pretty early on. Let's see. Chamberlain, khaki election, liberal unions. Wow, interesting. All right. Thought he was a... Anyways, I thought he was a conservative by the time... Anyways, you can see that he had a lot of, I guess, experience under his belt. I mean, like, he was literally a career politician, apparently, since 1900. I believe. Let me go up here and look at this real quick, though. Prime Minister, leader of the Conservative Party, but doesn't really give any more quick credits about what he's done. But still, I don't give that guy a lot of credit, although he has a lot of experience, and of course you could say he deserves a little bit of respect, because his whole entire philosophy of appeasement didn't make any sense. I mean, like, you know, there wasn't really a precedent for it at that point, because modern politics was still kind of forming and shaping with how it works, but, you know, it didn't make any sense at the time. You know, like, you're giving up countries to this guy who says he's wanting other countries, and you're saying, oh, that'll stop him from getting the rest of them he wants. You know, it didn't really make a lot of logical sense. But of course, that's kind of hindsight, because that's World War II, and we know how it turned out these days. But that's kind of my view. You know, I don't really put a lot of respect into any of them, because they honestly don't make any sense to me on any side. And that's kind of weighing in on my opinion in politics. But with that, I hope I kind of answered the question of why I just really don't give a hoot about the fella. But with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Jeff Brown, who says $10 for you, and another $10 is going to the Amber Heard Defense Fund. She's an actress, enforcer like Angelina Jolie.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for helping out this channel. It helps us out a great deal. And so, of course, we are highly appreciative of it. I don't really know a lot about the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case. Of course, I don't really know a lot about modern actors in general, but I do thank you very much for the support, and we will look into it. And so, with that, I thank you for the nice little joke, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Tony K, who says, you have probably answered this question before, but can a harpoon hit the Kerch Bridge?
I don't think so. I think the harpoons have a range of let me think. Let's actually just pull it up. Harpoon range. Harpoon anti-ship missile. I don't think it gives a public figure for range. I feel like it would. But let's go to Wikipedia here and let's see the range. Maximum speed 537 miles per hour. Wingspan, operational range. So it has an operational range of 75 nautical miles. So the answer would be no. There would be no way for the Ukrainians to actually launch that thing at that bridge and hit it from any distance that they can right now. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that answers the question in brief. And with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Danny Friedman, who says, thanks, Enforcer. Can you imagine if every one of this 30,000 Russian would have had sunflower seeds in their pocket? Ukrainian agriculture would have been booming.
Yeah, the sunflower seed oil industry would definitely be taking off right now if that was the case. But we actually know that the Ukrainians are at least being generous enough to put most of those bodies inside of refrigerated train cars, and they're waiting for the Russians to allow them to send those back to them for proper burials, which I actually think is really respectful of the Ukrainians, because although the Russians are invaders, they're at least giving the corpses the chance to actually be returned to Russia and give the families of those dead soldiers proper burials. So, sadly, that isn't the case. I wish it was the case with the sunflower seeds, but, you know, things, I guess, turned out a different way. But I thank you so much for the support, and also reminding us of that week 1 of the war when that woman said that to that soldier. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
All right, and up next we have a $9 donation from Craig, who says Ben Grant is the son of Helen Grant, MP and former Royal Marine. Dean Arthur is the former Grenadier Guard. An MP is equivalent to congressman slash congresswoman.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and it is good that I got that right on. I actually changed from senator to representative because I was like, that would be more accurate, and it does turn out that I am right. So I thank you very much for backing me up with that, and also I thank you so much for sharing the names of those brave soldiers that have gone from Britain to Ukraine to fight for them. And I also have to say that it's very wonderful to see that a soldier from the household guard, the Grenadier Guard in particular, is over there and fighting in Ukraine. I actually have a very high regard for the household guard, considering that their duties never stop when they return from a combat zone. They then immediately go to guarding royal residences, and I always thought that was very interesting to me, and I wish that they got a lot more respect from tourists, because of course tourists treat them like toys, but of course they are combat soldiers, and I love the uniforms, honestly. I think the uniforms are just amazing, really. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that addresses the comment in a way, and with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Louise Salmeron, who says, can Ukraine take back its Crimean territory?
I think they could, but it would be a very long time. I feel like it would most likely be months, and the Russians would have to be ground down to a nub, which we know that they're already being ground down to a nub. It's just a matter of months at this point. But at the same time, there's kind of a little bit of an issue because the Russians claim that a sovereign land, and, according to them, it's actually part of Russia. And so if the Ukrainians pushed into that, well, the Russians freak out and act like they're invading the motherland, I guess you could say. And then that could maybe lead them into a full mobilization. That's something I kind of concern myself with whenever thinking about that. But I do think that if that was out of the picture, the Ukrainians may consider actually pushing back into Crimea and trying to retake it. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're going to move on to the next one.
And up next, we have an $8 donation from Pedal Juice, who says, enforcers, enjoy a vicarious coffee on me. Alas, the bladder is declining invitations.
Well, I thank you very much for the support and the nice little quip at the end. That was a pretty funny one. And I will make sure to get a coffee. Of course, coffees do work on you incredibly quickly. And so usually Matthew and me have to take a quick restroom break before the stream starts, because for some reason coffee just does that. Don't know why. But also another thing I saw is that someone said, just to touch on something in the live chat real quick, Redwine65 said, I took a picture of a Vatican guard and he gave me a dirty look. Vatican Guard is a really cool unit. Of course, their official name, I believe, is the Swiss Pontifical Guard, and if it's like an actual, I believe, Italian or Latin, is like Pontifica Swiss Guardia or something like that. But anyways, they have been around forever. I mean, like, they were literally around during the sack of Rome in the 1500s. And, of course, there's the song from Sabaton. Everyone's heard it. But it was about how those Swiss mercenaries saved the Pope from getting killed during the sacking of Rome. An incredible story. But, of course, the Swiss Pontifical Guard is really cool. Let's pull them up. Swiss Pontifical Guard. Of course, some people are like, hey, they look like clowns. But, that's I feel like that's not really worthy of saying. They have a very long military heritage. They are, of course, Swiss mercenaries, which were highly sought after during the Middle Ages. But as time went on, they were, of course, replaced by German mercenaries. I forgot their name. Well, actually, I know their names. I'm just not wanting to pronounce it because people are going to be like, he pronounced it wrong. But still, while the colors are very vibrant, of course it's yellow and blue, they actually stood down the Nazis in World War II. Whenever they would try and pass into the Vatican, they would actually stop them and get in face-offs with the Germans, which does show you the bravery of these men because they were dressed just like this back in the day. One difference, though, is that they have switched out these helmets from being steel to now they're PVC because the steel helmets got incredibly hot, and they're trying to make sure that these guys don't die from, like, heat stroke. So they've switched out the helmets to PVC, which is kind of sad, but, I guess it makes sense. You don't want them to die of heat exhaustion. So I thank you very much for bringing that up. I thought that was really cool, and I wanted to touch on them a little bit because the Swiss Pontifical Guard has a very interesting history. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And next up, we have an $8 super chat from NOYDB, who wants you to watch Stripes.
Let me pull that up real quick. Stripes. This, oh, wait a minute, I just realized that showed a map. Let's go here. I think I've heard about this before. And I think I'll take a look at it. So I thank you very much for the support and the recommendation. I will try and take a look at that movie. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have another super chat from Zyper Sniper 1, who puts in an $8 donation and says, imagine having Zelensky on stream on day 100. Keep up the great work as always, and road to $1 million in support for Ukraine.
And I thank you so much for the support. Also, you set a very high goal. We're currently around 270,000 in total for support of Ukraine. But I hope that we can get up to 1 million someday. I feel like that would be huge, and I would be more than happy to know that that we all came together, including me, to try and get that much support for Ukraine. And so I thank you very much for the high goal there. We will try and reach it if we can, of course, weather permitting, I guess you could say. And also, I do thank you so much for enjoying these streams. And so, with that, we are trying to see about bringing President Zelensky on, but progress is kind of slow. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that addresses every part of that question. And with that, we're moving on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $7 donation from Castle, who says, Enforcer, are there not any M777s in the Severodonetsk area, and why not?
There are M777s in every part of the front line at this point, although the density of them is low. And so they are there and they are being used. We have had footage of them previously over the past few days in that area. And so to answer that question, by and large, they are there and they are being used. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Stray Cat 241, who says, Don, take some vids or pics at the reenactment. Monday would be cool, Don. Heard any news on destroyed Terminators? Is the armor thickness even good?
The armor thickness on the Terminators is incredibly poor. It's once again just a T-72 that has a upgraded, well, not really an upgraded, it's a different turret, but it uses the exact same hull as a normal T-72. So the armor is as weak as a normal T-72 main battle tank. I would take pictures of the reenactment, but the problem is that if I take pictures of the reenactment, there are people in my group that are very distinct. People are, of course, very distinct. And once I show pictures of who those people are, then people will know what group that is. They can trace down their Facebook pages and all that stuff, and then y'all will see what I look like. And I'm trying to keep that a little bit anonymous, so that way whenever I do a face reveal, it's not like already known beforehand. But I do thank you very much for the support. I would send pictures, but I do want to try as best as possible to keep my identity anonymous. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support. But sadly, I don't think I'd be able to do the pictures of the reenacting of it. I hate to say it, but I will. I can't say that either, but I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, I want to recognize a $5 donation from Junebug, and this is the other Junebug, not Junebug72, which is the other one. There's actually two in the chat, so this is the second one. So thank you very much for your support of the channel. We appreciate it very much, and we are moving on to the next one. The next one we have is from Tedgar, who puts in a $25 donation and says, Finland is preparing. Contractors already providing prefab fortifications. Check Finnish Defense Force channel. Also good. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Battlefield 2020 vid there, which is about FDF reaction to hostile events.
Well, thank you very much for the support. Of course, it helps out our channel a great deal. I say that every time, but I think y'all know that it helps me out a great deal, and I'm very appreciative that people will help us to keep on running. And to answer that question, well, I really addressed the comment. I wouldn't doubt it. I will try and pull it up and take a look at it. And of course, the Finns have a perfect country for a defensive war. As you can see here, their country is made up of lakes. If there was a land of lakes out there, it is Finland. And this really helps them out in defensive wars because this is nothing but choke points. There's really no way for a military to cross through Finland without having to suffer through lake hell. That's the only way I can describe this stuff. This is certainly lake hell. So I do believe that if the Finnish are setting up defenses, it is most likely a precaution, just in case if things went from bad to worse. We already have an example where that happened in Ukraine, and they are just making sure to protect themselves if something was to happen instantaneously. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I will look into that. I wouldn't doubt that at all. And with that being said, we're moving on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from BSG Wolf, who's a channel legend, who says, my friend in Zaporizhia says there's an extreme shortage of salt in Ukraine, and people are stocking up on staples and canned foods.
And where was that again?
In Zaporizhia.
Ah, yes. Well, that would be sensible. Of course, stocking up on foods and stuff would be important, because while it may not be under direct threat of attack, which it's not, I believe it's about 20 miles away. Yeah, about 20 miles away from the front lines. Of course, the supermarkets could get hit like they were in Chernihiv, and that could leave people with a shortage of food. So it's always important to stock up on food, but at the same time, you don't want to become a hoarder, because then you're going to start hurting the entire community, because there's going to be a load of people out there who can't actually get food they need, and you'll just have this surplus of food that you're going to hoard for yourself and then, leave others to starve. So hopefully the Ukrainians have that situation under control where that kind of stuff doesn't happen, because it's important to look out for everyone instead of just making sure that there's a sole person who's, well off. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the question. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from a viewer who says, don't read my name out loud. And don't worry, I couldn't pronounce it anyway, so that's probably for the best. They say, Enforcer, when will Starsky come back to your stream?
He'll be back on tomorrow. Starsky wants to come on this stream. Like we literally ask him, hey, if you want to come on next stream, that's fine. He'd be like, okay. And it's like a question. We're like, what? And he loves to come back. He feels like we do a great deal of help for Ukraine, which we do. We try our best, and he loves it. And so he is always happy to come on here every single Sunday and help us out. One thing I want to do with guest stars, because I don't really like this idea, is I always want to make sure that whenever we have guests, they come on a Sunday fundraiser night. Because one thing that's always weird to me is that whenever I see guest stars go on other channels and there's like super chats coming through and stuff, it's kind of weird to me, because it's like, is that channel like profiting off of the guest star? And I don't want to be like bringing them on to like monetize on it. I want to make sure that they're actually helping out the cause. So that's why I always bring on guest stars during Sunday night fundraisers and never during any other time, because every other day of the week people send in super chats to support the channel, and then on Sunday everyone's sending in money to support a fundraiser for a nonprofit in Ukraine. And so I feel like it's something that feels right to me. So I hope that kind of answers the question as to why he's not on here all the time and he only comes on Sundays, but he will be on here tomorrow. So I hope that answers the question, and I do thank you very much for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Humbled Potato, who says, so we saw an instance of Cassavac, and now we're seeing Capavac.
Do you know what that means?
Capavac is in like a baby cow.
Oh, I couldn't read it, so the joke fell flat on me. But I get what you're saying now, and I do thank you very much for the joke. I wish I could have read that one, and probably would have hit me better if I could. But I do thank you once again. Of course, the support helps us out greatly, and I do like the attempt at comedy. And I will give out a nice laugh just because I knew what you were trying to do, but sadly I couldn't read it. So, and I thank you so much once again. And I'm sadly I couldn't read it, but I do see where the joke would be very funny. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $10 donation from Ashley, who says, the Enforcer and Enforcer Matt are the best duo for Ukraine news. And thank you very much for the kind words, Ashley.
And I thank you so much for the kind words as well. Of course, we appreciate that a lot of our viewers do love our news, and also I'm very glad that a lot of people like our presentation of it, and also how it's all run. So I thank you very much for complimenting us and saying we're the best duo. We try our best, and so I'm very glad that we could deliver, at least in your opinion. And so thank you very much once again. It does help out this channel a lot that you did send in some support. It's the only thing that keeps the channel running. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Jim Darby, who says, great job, guys.
And I thank you once again. Of course, we always get a lot of people sending in super chats saying we're doing a great job, and I'm more than happy to accept the compliment. So I thank you very much once again for saying that we're doing a pretty good job. We always try our best, and I'm very happy that we can deliver. And so with that, I thank you once again, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have a $5 donation from Kevin Scott 76, who says, we could call the strongest man from Ukraine Mr. Muscle Time.
Yeah, if Mr. Muscle Time and Mr. Lunchtime went head to head, Mr. Lunchtime is going to die. Mr. Muscle will literally just pick that thing, that man up and throw him into the Dnipro River. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Yuri Bench, who says, we are still waiting for your cooperation with the excellent Ukrainian YouTuber Denis Davidok.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, but one does have to remember that we only bring on guests on this channel during Sunday night fundraisers. And one thing I want to do is kind of give them their own airtime, because while having Funker and Starsky on at the same time was fun, it was a little bit difficult to make sure that the pacing and everything was good. And that was something that I started to get worried about before it started, and it was a challenge to keep going. So honestly, while that was cool, I kind of just want to bring on the guest stars one at a time, where they're on, like just me and them instead of like multiple people, because then it nearly becomes like a panel. And that's kind of one thing that I don't like about mainstream news, is when they always bring on the opinion panels on every channel. So I thank you very much for the support, and I will try and see about reaching out to all of these channels. It's just that we have so many recommendations, it's really hard to pick, and also we always want to give precedent to Starsky since he is over there. And so I thank you very much for the support. I hope you understand the position we're coming from with guest stars and such things like that, and how we're looking at it. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Diffuse56, who says, I have to go AFK early tonight, working tomorrow early. Be well and force your team and Leaf Spring Army. See you at the fundraiser, and Hiram Slava.
And I thank you so much for the support. It's totally okay if you do have to get off early. You're probably off right now, but I do want to make sure we address it. And I thank you very much for the support, and I hope you have a good time at work, and I hope you're here for the Sunday fundraiser, and that we can raise a nice, tidy little sum to make sure that we always get some kind of help to Ukraine every single week. And so I thank you once again for the support, and also your support to the Sunday fundraiser. And with that, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Koala Resistance again, who says, bravery is smiling back at death when death smiles at you, or yell at Russian warship, go to the bottom of the sea.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I think that is actually a pretty interesting comment. I do think that the Ukrainians at large are very brave people, and they have no problem speaking their minds to Russian warships and other things like that. And also, one time we had Ukrainian radio chatter here on this channel, and that was really funny because it literally sounded like a Call of Duty lobby in between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and they were free to speak their minds then all they wanted, and it was actually really hilarious, the interaction they had. So I thank you very much for the support. I hope that does address the comment, and with that, we're on to the next question.
And, oh my goodness, just a second, let me get rid of this bot.
Oh my god, I saw that one. Jeez.
The bots are getting a little bit more vocal. But anyways, up next we have a $5 donation from Sam Johnson, who says, hi from Russia, thank you for your coverage, and Slava Ukraine.
Well, I thank you very much for the support. It's good to hear that we do have some Russian viewers. I don't know how you're on YouTube. You must be using a VPN. And I don't know how you're using that, because I think they check all the tech, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad that you do enjoy this channel and that you find the news worthy. Hopefully it is a shining light in the night compared to what the Russian news is putting out, and hopefully you do find it very competent. And so I thank you very much for the support, and I am glad that we can get some of this news out to a few Russian viewers out there. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $10 donation from Phil Tatham, who says, German mercenaries were Hessians.
Yes, they were during the Revolutionary War, yes. But there are actually a large amount of small, I guess you could say city-states that were within the Holy Roman Empire, and later on within Germany in a small way, although it kind of changed, But still, there was a lot of small little kingdoms within, well, city-states. Well, yeah, kingdoms within what is now Germany that would send over mercenaries. And while they were Hessians during the American Revolutionary War, I actually think there were some different ones during the Napoleonic Wars later on. But I'm not entirely sure about that. But I do thank you very much for the support, and I hope I addressed that comment fairly well. And with that, I thank you once again, and we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from CA Lags, who says, those uniforms were from when you actually wanted to stand out in the field to intimidate your enemies and impress the ladies.
That is very true, and I know that camouflage is here for a reason, of course, but I hate that militaries got away from the very bright and colorful uniforms, and also military started to get away from cheery things, because back in the day, and of course World War I kind of smacked that all in the face, but back in the day, militaries would have cheery songs that always had good lyrics. It was about having an adventure, having a drink, finding like ladies, always having a fun time. All those songs were neat, lighthearted, and fun, and the uniforms were always just amazing looking. I mean, like every single uniform from the Victorian era, I'm a big fan of, and even the Napoleonic era and times before. But sadly, modern warfare changed all of that. But still, I've got to say, I love old uniforms. Of course, that's why I'm a reenactor as well, because I just think they look really cool. And I'm just a huge fan of that kind of look. It's great. Like on top, like just as an example, French Army in 1914. Let's see here. Here's a good picture that kind of illustrates the British Expeditionary Force in 1914, the French Army in 1914, and also the Germans in 1914 as well. And I have to say, out of all of these, French had style. The British uniform was not bad though. It was pretty decent. The German uniform, not really a big fan of it. It was kind of a little too basic, and I feel like it didn't really have a lot of style in it. And while fashion is, of course, something that a lot of people don't focus on now when talking about military, accoutrements and clothing, I still think it's a pretty good thing. I mean, like, why not try and look good, And that's one thing. Not getting too much on the side, but that's one thing that the British officer corps and British officer uniform in World War I, they had the uniforms down pat. If I can find a good picture, that's about the most decent one. Incredible. Boots, amazing. Pants, complementing the coat, great. The cross sash with the belt, wonderful. The actual cut of the tunic, spot on. I mean, like, I think that uniform right there is one of the best officer uniforms of the 20th century at least. So, I mean, that's not to say it's the best. It's one of the best. But it's pretty good. And so, I hope that kind of answers the question a little bit. Well, addresses the comment in a way. I know that's kind of a bit of an aside, but I'm a huge fan of actually having very nice looking military uniforms, because I feel like if a soldier is wearing a uniform, it ought to look sharp and they ought to look good. The uniform should complement the man instead of it detracting. And I kind of feel like modern ACUs, not to get into this whole entire thing, but ACUs like this one, I just don't really feel like that's nice looking. You know what I mean? It looks to me, and don't take this wrong or anything, but this is just my opinion. It looks like night clothes, and I'm not a big fan of that. It's always not really tailored well. It's not really form fitting. Every time I've seen anyone in like BDUs or ACUs, it always looks like they're wearing some kind of a pajama, and then the pants are huge and baggy. And the boots, I mean, the boots are okay. Can't really complain about the boots too much. But the rest of it, I'm like, yeah, I'm not really a big fan, honestly. I think the pinks and greens, we went back to the pinks and greens, as dress uniforms in the U.S. Army. I thought that was a really nice step in the right direction. It looks like usually, at least in the pictures, the coats are well tailored. The pants, of course, complement the tunic. Everything looks good. But this is, of course, getting well into, of course, I guess you could, like someone said, like Tim McPherson said, function over form. But at the same time, I feel like if World War II soldiers were able to still emphasize in a way form and function. I feel like modern uniforms should, of course, still look good, so that way you don't have to have both a dress uniform and a battle dress uniform. You could just have them both in the same. So I kind of hope that addresses my opinions on uniforms, but with that, we're not going to go on much longer. We're going to move on to the next question.
And Enforcer, it looks like we do have about 7 or 8 more super chats, so I think we're going to speed up the answers just a little bit so we have time to get to the live chat questions. Up next, we have a $5 donation from BL Parak, who says, the answer to the 40 billion is, if Russia gets through Ukraine and attacks Poland, we will be in a world war, and it is best to stop them now.
I do agree, and I think that is a very good explanation of why that would be a good argument. So I thank you very much for bringing that one up. That's actually a pretty solid one. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $5 donation from Xavier Estrada, who says, invite Artur Rihai. He's a funny and good guy.
I will see about that. I've actually watched a couple of his videos. Pretty interesting channel. He's got a very good personality, and I think I might try and bring him on. So I thank you very much for the support, and we will look into that. Sorry if the answers are getting a little bit brief. I actually just noticed we are going into marathon length here. I didn't realize that because I was having such a fun time. And so with that, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $4 donation from Voitech CYVR, who says, Enforcer or Matt, Google David Attenborough narrates how Russian tanks end their life in Ukraine. I can't stop laughing, and it's great content.
I will make sure to take a look at that, and it does sound like it would be a little bit humorous. And so, thank you very much for the support. Sorry if the the answers are getting a little bit brief, but I do thank you very much for the support, and I will take a look at that. And with that being said, we're on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $4 donation from Philip Fixes, who says, how about a quick history of artillery and blimps? You get my 20 every Sunday, and I doubled when you did.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I would give a history of artillery and blimps, but sadly, I think we're a little bit pressed for time. And so, if you could put a note now, Matthew, to have that actually as one of our questions during tomorrow's Sunday fundraiser for me to answer, I'll try and go through the history of artillery and blimps, specifically in World War I, since I think you're kind of asking about that era. But I do thank you very much for the support, and with that, we are now going to move on to the next question.
And up next, we have a $20 donation from William Allen, who says, check out the Fighting Texas Aggie Band uniforms. All the Corps looks sharp and a blast from the past.
Texas Aggie Band. Let's pull that up. Texas Aggie Band. Fighting Texas Aggie Band. Let's take a look at this. Images. Yeah, I would say if these uniforms were described as anything, I would say these are like the 1970s-ish style uniforms, also with the garrison cap. Pretty nice, actually. It definitely is a blast from the past, I can tell you that. So I thank you very much for the support, and I hope that does address the comment in a way. And of course, thank you so much once again, William Allen. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And I want to recognize a few donations without comments here. We have a $2 donation from Dean. We have a $2 donation from Henrietta Langley. And a $1 donation from Gamer Boy X. Thank you very much to all three of you for your support of the channel. And as always, it helps us keep running the channel, so we appreciate it very, very much. And moving on to our next super chat, we have a $2 donation from CA Lags, who says, just got my Mr. Lunchtime hoodie.
Hey, well, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope you enjoy that hoodie. I thought that was a really good design, honestly, out of all of them, and so I hope that you wear that thing in public and people ask, what is that? So that way you can explain what it is. So I thank you so much for the support. I'm glad that you did get the merch, and I hope you do enjoy it. And with that being said, we are on to the next question.
And CA Lags, make sure you don't leave that hoodie alone in the kitchen. Unfortunate things might happen. But up next, we have a $2 donation from Nobody Knows, who says, send an Enforcer t-shirt to Zelensky to wear.
I've been thinking about that, but the thing is that he probably gets a whole bunch of mail, and they're probably scared about giving some of it to him because it might have like poison on it. But I would look into that, and if I could ever get him on stream, I would, of course, tell him afterwards, like, I'm going to send you a shirt. Could you wear that? Like, you know, because that would be neat, honestly. But I do thank you so much for the support, and I would want to do that. Actually, that's something I will definitely try and see if I can do, if I can ever get him on stream. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question.
And next up, we have, I think this is actually our last super chat. Let me make sure here. Yeah, this is our last super chat of the night. We have a $1 donation from Boris DeRoe, who says, Joyeux Noel, great World War One movie.
I think I've heard of that one before, and I'd have to say, if I remember it correctly, which I'm remembering it very vaguely, it was pretty good. So I thank you very much for the support and also the recommendation for everyone else. If I also haven't watched that, then for me as well. And so with that, we have now reached the end of the super chats for tonight. We're also going to have to put a cutoff on them because this stream is running late, and it is a marathon stream right now. And so with that, we're going to answer 2 questions from the live chat because we are very pressed for time right now, and then we're going to wrap up tonight's stream. And so with that, what is the first question?
So first up from the live chat, we have a question from Mech Tactical, who says, has the Queen of England made a statement about the Ukraine war yet?
I don't think she has. Unfortunately, I don't really know a lot about international news. She may have, but I don't know of it. So I hope that kind of answers the question, at least as far as my knowledge can take it. And with that, we're going to move on to the last question of the night. And so, who's the lucky last person who got in a question?
So the last one of the night goes to James Reyes, who says, Enforcer, do you think Ukraine will be able to ship its grain out to the world without Russian intervention?
I think Ukraine would not be able to do that. Most of that was going to be transported by ship, most likely, because it's a large bulk, like aggregate material. And sadly, well, not aggregate, it's just a bulk material, and so usually that's transported by ship. And the Russians are blockading their ports, so sadly, most of that's not going to make it out. Most of it would have to travel into a European country by road or by rail to then be shipped out to the rest of the world, which may complicate the process to the point not a large amount of it gets out. So sadly, that's going to be my answer. I don't think there's any way for them to do that now. But of course, the Russians made an offer, I'm not sure if it's still on the table, that if the West lifts the sanctions on Russia, or some of them, they will actually stop the blockade on Ukraine. So I'm still looking into that one and seeing if it is true or if there's any merit to it. And I hope I answered that question. And I actually saw one last super chat come in from Fat Bass Matthew. So if we could address that one real quick, we'll end the stream right after that.
So Fat Bass puts in a $4 donation and says, thanks so much for your generosity with time. Apologies for a modest donation. I've been stretched since the genocide started.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, and it's totally fine. I'm just glad that a lot of people do watch the streams, and that's good enough for me. But of course, I always have to make sure that there's bills paid, and I'm actually surviving all of this. So of course, I always do rely on support, but I don't want anyone to ever feel pressured to support the channel. But I do thank you so much, Fat Bass, for the support, and it's totally fine. Of course, I enjoy spending a lot of time doing the streams. Matthew, on the other hand, like once it gets late, he starts passing out over there, so that's why he was like, hey, can we speed it up, because he's actually probably about to fall out dead. So that's why it's kind of being sped up a little bit right now. But I do thank you so much for the support, Fat Bass, and we appreciate any amount of support we can get. And if you feel a little hard pressed and it's not really possible to support us, don't worry, don't sweat. We'll be fine. But I thank you more than anything for your support. It means a lot to us. And with that, we've now reached the conclusion and the end of tonight's Day 94 stream. And whew, it's been 3 hours and 30 minutes long. This has been a really long stream, but honestly, it hasn't felt that long to me. I've had a lot of fun telling you all the news, and of course giving my input and analysis as to what's going on, and I hope you all have enjoyed it as well. It's always an honor for me to be able to tell the news to everyone around the world as to what's going on, and then a lot of people do enjoy it, and I'm always very honored that everyone considers this to be a valuable and actual credible news source on the war. And so I thank you all once again. I hope you all show up for tomorrow's Sunday night fundraiser. We will only have a $5,000 goal tomorrow, so it's not like we're trying to shoot for the moon or anything, but it would be nice if everyone did come through and at least watch the stream or chip in a buck or two. So I thank you all once again, and I will see you all on tomorrow's stream at 10 p.m. Eastern time, and after that I will be taking my Monday break to go reenact for the first time in a year. And so I thank you all once again, and I will see you all tomorrow on the Sunday night fundraiser. Thank you once again, and take care.